You're listening to Lemon's Listening Library. Discover the story behind the stories with unique and raw conversations from the people who make your favorite books a reality.
In the past where we just start talking and we'll start riffing and then I'll let it go and then just do the intro where it feels natural.
Oh, you better believe, I mean, like I said, I have a podcast, and so like I have to be diligent to remind my ADHD co-host, who's Kenna to like, we have to do the intro now. It's been 25 minutes and now I don't know how I'm going to splice this to make any sense.
Wait, okay, hang on. Actually, I think I remember this. You and her like friends and stuff, and the way that you guys talk to each other and the banter between you two. When I first found your little clips of what you were doing, I thought it was like, oh, it's not going to come out for a while. This is a podcast I'm going to be waiting for. And then I realized it was already out, and I was like, yeah, I have to go listen to you two because your banter back and forth is hilarious.
Yeah, people often accuse us of either hating each other or like something like that because we argue a lot, but in fun ways. So it's we have a good dynamic. We have a lot of fun with our nonsense, and I mean we're both in this space of like, you know, like trying to dive into the different market aspects of it and understand it better. And so the two of us will have very different opinions on things sometimes. And then we'll go down these rabbit holes of like, oh, now we have to talk about this because I disagree with you entirely. And but most of the time we just like kind of playfully make fun of each other.
Who's your co-host?
Kenna Ray. She is a best-selling author. She wrote the All Hallows series, so All Hallows Haunt, All Hallows Escape, All Hallows, etc. I narrated actually All Hallows Haunt with Maven Celeste, and I'm narrating He Who Haunts Me, which was her, I believe, her best-selling novel. I don't know the numbers, but her best-selling novel, I believe, and I think her debut novel. Anyway, but she. I'm doing that one with Maven Celeste as well, so I'm gonna get to have another one. It's a very it's a very fun, like kind of like serial killy, like, you know, romance, but it's like a lot of thriller thrown in. So the first one was contemporary romance. This one's a thriller. And yeah, she's continued. She writes all the time. She's got a bunch of demon stuff coming up and all kinds of fun things. So yeah, she's very immersed in the like author world of all that stuff. She's very much a writer, and I'm very much not.
But Kathy, their chemistry with each other is, I mean, he's so right. I can see how people could think that they hate each other, but when I was listening to like their little podcast snippets, I was like, oh my god, I need this story of these two people falling in love, because the way, and I know that's probably so awkward to hear, Ethan, because, you know, she's probably like a really good friend, but like they're like they're arguing and they're bantering back and forth. I'm like, this is like enemies to lovers vibes.
We've actually had, when we first started the podcast, we were talking to somebody who was like, people are going to ship your like relationship, and we're like, we don't care. We're both very married with our own two other people, to be clear, and, you know, have kids and everything else. So we get that, like, that is an aspect of it that when you hear it, you're probably going to be like, these people get along so well, but really we're just very, very good friends, and we have an absolute blast. I met her just like I was doing a live on TikTok, and it was like when I very first started off doing voice work again. I was like, hey, I'm just going to join some people who are doing this stuff. And she heard me talking, and I think I picked on her a little bit. And she was like, I really like, I don't remember what she said, something about liking my voice, but we were giving each other grief back and forth from the comment section. And then we ended up talking about doing the book together, which was All Hallows Haunt, because she was looking for a narrator. She actually, she had like set up a shrine, or I don't remember all this stuff that she does, but like I'm going to get a narrator. This is the year that I get this book narrated. It's going to happen. And then like the next week she met me. And so then we started working on it. Right. It came out like a few months later. And during that process, we became really close friends. And we were like, I mean, you know what people don't do a lot of is smut podcasts. Like there aren't very many of them. It's a big audience. Like we're both in the industry. We're both like doing this. It might be fun to hear about it from the inside perspective when we get along. And we just kind of became best friends out of it, which has been great.
That's amazing.
We might need her on the show, and we might need you both on the show together. I'm just saying, like, let's do a co-host or a podcast collaboration. That would be so great.
You know what? I've seen people do that. I think it would always be fun. I'm not telling you have to do this. I just think it's fun. Is when they swap a co-host, or they have two people do the other person's podcast, and like I'm
That
not
would be
saying we
pure
necessarily
chaos. I would
should
love it.
do that.
Podcast swap. I love it.
Yeah, those are fun. We don't do a lot of interviews. We've only done one. It was with Vera Valentine and Unfortunate Reads, Cassie, about their book, which was called Pushing Cushions, and that's the only interview we've done so far. Everything else has just been us like basically making fun of each other for like 17 or 18 episodes. So that's about it.
Well, I love that dynamic though, because like, on our podcast, like me and Kathy develop a relationship or the other co-hosts, and we develop a relationship, but we don't really develop a deep relationship with the people we have on an interview.
Right.
Whereas like you guys develop this relationship, and whenever people listen to that, like I enjoy that these two people know each other so well, and I hear their stories and that they can banter and have the inside jokes that now I'm a part of because I've been here from the beginning, and I love that.
Yeah, I love that too. Thank you. It's I think the thing that I enjoy about it most is that we never have we never have the same episode, and we never have a dry episode. It's always like there's either something very important that we get into. We've talked about AI like 4 times now, maybe 3 times, I don't know. But then we also like sometimes the last episode we were just like she'd just gotten back from a book convention. We were both exhausted. It was like, I don't even know, like 1 a.m. when we were recording. And so we were, just trying to make it through it. And we ended up writing a Hermione fanfic. And it was the worst thing that's ever happened. And I don't like Hermione. That's a me thing.
That is a you thing. There's something wrong with you, because that is great. No, I'm just kidding.
His name was Driscoll Maddock. We wrote it as a country, he was a farmhand. She was in the British. He was Southern. She was British. They were in the British lowlands, which I don't know if those exist. And it was like weird and chaotic, and yeah, it was fun, but it was also just like that's what happened that whole episode, was just chaos. We were just making crap.
That's amazing.
So.
Yeah, talk about a market audience. Dramoni fans, they are everywhere. So that's a good one.
I don't know that they would like that episode, because I multiple times talk about how I hate. I think I lead into the idea of doing it by saying, I don't want to be a Hermione podcast. I'm so sick of hearing about Hermione, and then we make one. So yeah, I'm very sorry.
But that is, I mean, okay, there is a craft to pissing people off just enough to get them hooked, and then they come and listen to the rest of it.
That is a talent, Ethan.
If you want to hear about Driscoll Maddock and his alabaster snakes, which are magical and they're raised on a horse farm for some reason, and they're step siblings, but to be fair, that was Kenna's idea. I didn't do that one. I didn't like that. Her name was Harmony. It's fine. If you want to hear that made up AU that we created on a podcast that's on Morally Grey's Anatomy is what it's called. Which originally we named it that because the idea originally was she would kill me every episode, because she was a thriller author primarily. She's like, I know a lot of ways to kill a man. You're a man and deserve it. And I'm like, fair. And so every episode would be that, like, you're going to die at the end of every episode. At some point, we just were like, this is too much. So we stopped. It was pretty early.
A lot of work, yeah.
Yeah. It feels weird to talk about choking you to death every episode. I was like, yeah, I realize that.
I just love that name, though. Morally Grey, especially in the romance community. That name alone is like, okay, you've got like about 80% of the community wanting to listen to that now.
That's where my name came from. I was like, I need a pseudo. I can't be. I started off as I was naming myself all kinds of crazy things, trying to think of like something to get into the market. And then I ran across the name Grumble, and that's where I got to be the most popular. When that name no longer lives, it's gone now. And whenever I met Kenna, she was like, you can't narrate my book as Grumble. I refuse. You need to make up a name. And so my wife and I talked through it and came up with Ethan Gray. And that's how I'm Ethan Gray. I've been Ethan Gray for a year now, which feels weird.
I love it. Well, I feel like this is a great point to go ahead and jump into the intro of our podcast. So welcome, everyone. This is Lemons Listening Library. I am your host, Randy Lemons, fantasy author, or RL Rose to those of you in the romance community. I am joined today by my amazing co-host, Kathy. Kathy, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey, y'all. I'm Kathy Ireland. I am an avid audiobook listener, and I also do, I started doing audiobook production with an author, so that's been pretty exciting, and an all-around member of the romance community.
Awesome. Well, before we introduce our guest, which you guys already have a pretty big hint at who we're talking to today, I do want to do just a little bit of housekeeping. If you guys are interested in having your services announced on the show or advertised for anyone listening, go over to our Patreon, check it out. It's a great way to support the show and get your stuff out there. All right, guys. Ethan Gray, we are so excited to have you on the show. Will you do a little introduction of telling our guests and listeners, not our guests, geez, our listeners who you are?
Hi, I'm Ethan Gray. I am a voice actor and a narrator, mostly the latter. I have narrated books mostly from Shaw Hart and Luna Wilder. I've also done one book from Kenna Ray. I have a lot of projects coming out, including a book with J.T. Geisinger, because I won the Next Dark Star 2024. Alongside Jessie Elwin, who is a fantastic narrator, and you should go listen to her stuff. She has way more than I do, and she's amazing. And I have a lot of projects coming out. I'm excited to talk about, and I'm also, always looking to get into the voice world. So I'm doing as much as I can on that side too. And I have a podcast, which I mentioned. I do a lot of stuff. I do, everything from voice acting to narration to erotica to, what's the other, the podcast to, anything I can get into, basically.
Yeah, isn't it funny how, like, as we get into this bookish world, we're like, where all can we get our claws into to be a part of this giant community? Because, like, that was me. I was like, okay, I want to be more involved in this community. How can I do that? Oh, let's create a podcast and have everyone in the book community come on, whether they're authors, narrators, editors, publishers. Let's do it.
Yeah. And I mean, candidly, I started off my career years ago in doing trying to do anime voices back in the day. And when I decided to come back and try it again to get into the market, I was looking at audiobooks and thinking about like what the future of them looks like and kind of where they're going. But my goal was always like, I'm going to do audiobooks, like regardless of, what else I do, because voice acting it's one of those gigs where like, if you want to do it full time, you have to do everything you can do basically. And so I was like, I know that audiobooks are going to be a big element of this. I would like it to stay that way forever. And so that's kind of where I started focusing on, was like, I want to do audiobooks. And then it just kind of fell into place where I kept getting books and more books, and I kept getting auditions, and I was like, okay, this is happening. So let's focus here, and I'll keep trying to do other things whenever I get free time. And I have not gotten a lot of free time.
So are you an anime fan yourself?
I am, yeah. I grew up in the era where like Adult Swim would come on in the middle of the night, and you could watch like Dragon Ball Z. And Steve Bloom, who is a hero of mine, like as a voice actor. If you know who he is, he's the robot that would come on Adult Swim, who would do the welcome to Adult Swim. It's time to He was also the voice of a million people, but the one that sticks in my brain the most is Spike from Cowboy Bebop, which is like my personal favorite show. And so growing up, I would hear all these really cool voices, and they're just like screaming, and there's lights going off. And I always felt kind of bad because I grew up really religious. I was like, I don't know if this is wrong. So I'm going to watch it in the middle of the night in my room and not tell anybody because it seems bad. And so I would just get exposed to all this like really interesting anime and different things like that. And I grew up watching it. And so I eventually really fell in love with it. And it became something I wanted to do whenever I got older. And I happened to live in Dallas when I was around the time where Funimation was doing a lot of open auditions. So if you've ever heard of like Full Metal Alchemist and like Travis Willingham, around the time that he was auditioning for that show, which I think was one of his first big ones, I was auditioning for Dead Man Wonderland in like the same building. The two of us were both like just going into Funimation Studios in Dallas and like doing open casting calls and like trying to get jobs.
Did you know Travis? Do you know Travis?
No. Come on, no, I don't know Travis. I don't know Travis. I just realized that I had, after he became famous, I was looking back on the timeline. I was like, I'm pretty sure I was in the same building at the same time as him. And that's like my only credit for that. Which, I mean, I could just go to like a place where he is and be like, and now I'm the same. But yeah, that was kind of my, I think early in his career, I was kind of doing the same thing. All of us were just like, walking into studios, please hire me for the love of God, trying to get vocal direction. I was young and just trying to figure things out. And I only got background voices, so I'm not even named in anything. But it was a really fun experience early on to try to get into it, figure out how to scream in a way that people want to hear.
Right?
Things like that.
Yeah. Especially
Yeah.
in anime, because there is so many action scenes and stuff. And
Yeah.
my husband was telling me about how like he was watching, video game guys where they have to like grunt in so many different ways for their
Yeah.
character. It's like, ugh.
Oh yeah,
Ugh.
I have a whole suite of that where I used to like sit there and be like, like a lot of those. They'd be like, give me 10. I'm like, okay, here we go. And that's all I did, right? Because I never got any major roles. And so like Dead Man Wonderland has a lot of screams in it and a lot of grunting and things like that. And there's also a lot of if you ever see an ellipsis in an like anime script, it's a noise. It's not a pause. So whenever you see an ellipsis, it's not like, okay, now I wait. You go, or you go, or you go, oh God. Like there's always some kind of noise there. And so I would like to fill that stuff. And so I have no real experience in actually doing anything there beyond the like making all the grunting noises, which maybe that was helpful for romance. I don't know.
Right. Caveat into moaning later on. Gotcha.
You know what? I can use this. Hang on.
That strange talent that we all have as kids is like actually works for us as adults.
Yep. Yeah, it's funny how it kind of worked out, and I'm happy it did. I still really love anime, and God, I'd love to be in one day, but it's not the same as it used to be, and things are getting so quickly, turned on their head with the entire market like shifting a lot of the way it's doing voices, and it's just gotten to where like things are tough now, and it's getting tougher. So I picked a weird time to get into it, but it's okay.
Well, I feel like there would be a natural transition back into it or transition because so much anime is getting very smutty. Like they are just going so like almost, straight porn with some of it. And so it would just be natural for you to be like, I do this, now I'm going to transition back into that.
I mean, one of the things I really like, and I wish they'd voice more of these, a lot of these aren't necessarily voiced or they're voiced by like AI voices. But I've really gotten into like the dating sim, like otome games and stuff like that. Like everything around the romance market is really fascinating to me as I'm getting back into this. And so I've seen a lot of like these dating sims that people are really into and enjoying. I'm like, man, I would love to do a voice for that. I bet it's fun. I bet it's fun like being this like, this guy that like you have to like romance and he's such a brat. And you're like, I hate this guy so much. Like, that's gotta be so much fun to do.
And what is that?
It's spelled Otome. It's otome games. That's the Japanese word for it, where it's kind of originated from there. But they're like visual novels. Sometimes they're like gacha games. Is another term for it. That's GACHA, where you like spend real money to try to like get cards or characters or whatever. And there's a romanceable element in those games where typically the majority of the people who play them are women. And the audience is huge. It's one of those markets that not a lot of people talk about, but there's a lot of crossover between like erotica and romance novels and people who play these games because there's a really similar element of it. It's just kind of like how much engagement you have.
Right.
So yeah, it's really fascinating.
Interesting.
Yeah, and there's even like apps that you can talk to AI generated characters too. That is something that my kids have brought to me, and I was like, oh, well, okay, we're not doing this. You guys are never allowed to have this app because it can go very like personal and descriptive in some areas.
Yeah.
Wow.
And it's all machine learning, so it's picking up on what other people are teaching it. And so if people are teaching it terrible things, it will tell other people those terrible things. I won't name any of them because I don't want to platform AI stuff. But there are a lot of different things to do this, and it's getting into the erotica space of it too, where there are these male voices and even female voices that are like AI generated that will speak back to you based on prompts, and they're similarly like. It seems like every time we invent a robot, people want to use it for sex. You know what I mean? Like, that's a very, like, was it like weird science-y kind of thing? Like, anytime humans invent something, it seems like they always want to, like, start putting it toward, like, could you have sex with it?
Like, why does this dishwashing robot... Yeah, it's like, why does this dishwashing robot have a penis? I don't understand the function of this.
That forklift has a really big strap on it, and I don't know what it's for. But I weirdly am into it. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. No. I feel like, especially in today's age where sexuality is kind of like, okay, we all have it, it's not, it's just like something everyone's got, it's just different flavors. And so I feel like now it's getting into more of, okay, where can we explore with this? That is such a high paid thing that you can make money off of it because everyone has it, that they're also leaning into, okay, well, how can I make money off of this?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's also the element of like, for a lot of people, and I think there's a reactionary element of this too, for a lot of people, it's something they hide, right? So it's something either you grow up repressing, and so then you want to express it as you get older, or you get into a relationship maybe where it's repressed, or you have like a faith where it's repressed, or whatever. And so a lot of that ends up being behind closed doors and on second accounts and all that kind of stuff. And that's the thing that I think is where a lot of people get into trouble around this stuff, because they're like, oh, I'm talking to my AI boyfriend. And then I don't know if there was a famous video a while back where this girl was like having a whole relationship with an AI boyfriend she created, and her boyfriend found out about it and asked her to leave to can't delete the app, and she chose the AI boyfriend. And I still to this day, I think it was a Reddit thing or something, but there was like screenshots and the whole thing. I still to this day think like, I think like this is partially from the like loneliness, non-connection thing that we struggle with. I think it's part of like repression. I think it's part of struggling to communicate with people about your needs and feelings. And the romance market, especially around books, does a really good job of opening those doors and saying, it is okay to come in here. We police this space. We take care of this space. We want you to feel safe and loved in this space, to know that this is a protected space, and that we very much care about your sexuality. It's an important thing, especially women's sexuality, which is something that has just been repressed over and over and over again throughout history. So much so that like, when I was just talking about sexual expression, a lot of people probably thought immediately I was thinking about men and not women, because that's how most of the time, we don't think of human sexual expression, we think of male sexual expression. And I think that's the thing that romance really, really opens the doors on, that people struggle with. And I think that's why it's such a big market.
I agree.
No, and that makes sense too, because wait, what? Did I miss something?
I said I talk a lot, sorry.
Oh
no.
I think that's actually what you're here for. It might have been one of the...
Well, maybe too much is the word music.
No, it's great. And especially because this is a good conversation. Like, that is something that you're right. That is something I've experienced in the past, and I've been shamed for, because I'm very sexually open on like the way I discuss things. And my husband often describes me as a teenage boy because of the way that I talk of stuff. And it's so gender, you're either this or that, but women's minds are just as bad, if not worse, than men's.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's the thing. That's exactly what I mean, is that like, no offense to your husband, I'm just saying more when like people, when they think of someone,
he can take all the offense.
when people think of like someone who is sexually like overactive or really interested in sex, they think teenage boy. Like, they think of an age and a gender, versus the reality of that is that, yeah, I mean, teenage, everyone, like every human being, like that, you go through puberty, it happens to all of us. And then as a young adult, like the same thing is true. And there's a lot of like, hormone growth throughout our life, a lot of sexual awakenings for each of us as we grow older. Like, it's crazy to think that like only one subset of an entire, society can be the ones that are quote unquote horny, right? Like, that's insane to be like, only they are allowed to. They're allowed to. That's okay. We're allowed to talk about all the gross stuff.
But,
Yeah, we can talk about all the gross stuff when it comes to boys, but God forbid we talk about anything gross whenever it comes to, like, it's crazy.
Yeah, no, it is a strange dynamic around the way that works. And even like in the past, like me just saying the chastity belt thing, that was a real thing. Like, people actually put those on women to forbid them from pleasuring themselves or being pleasured and make sure they stay pure. Are you fucking kidding me?
Yeah. It's the crazy thing is too, like, a lot of people think of chastity belts and they're assuming you mean the like ones that were outwardly dangerous to men who tried to like harm women, when as like in reality, the vast majority of them that we have examples of were exactly that. They were not to prevent men from harming women. They were to prevent women from pleasuring themselves, which is so can I cuss here?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
Have you not been hearing me?
So fucked up.
Fucked up.
It's so fucked up. I'm
You
sorry.
know, and
I
I
just wanted
think
to make you
no,
believe it.
no, and I think that a little deep here,
No,
but
I know. Let's get mad. Let's.
I know, but
Yeah.
I think that people think that the chastity belt is like a thing of the past. However,
Yeah.
we may not have actual physical chastity belts, but we do still have emotional and mental chastity belts that are put on women from, you know, I mean, of all ages, and
Yeah.
it's a tool to bring to shame them into owning who they are sexually and
You're
embracing their
not allowed to
sexuality
live.
and their
You're not
sensuality.
allowed to live who you are biologically because it is somehow. And then there's, I mean, all sorts of extremes around that, around what people do to like prevent kids from, or teenagers and then like adults from feeling comfortable and being, a human. But then there's also the like the terrible things that we put on ourselves because of that guilt, right? Like I grew up very religious.
Same.
Like for a very long time, I had a lot of like guilt and I would repress a lot of feelings and thoughts about like what was healthy and what wasn't. And the only thing that ever comes out of that is like being worse as a person. Like I would just
Shaming yourself.
yeah, all it did was make me worse at relationships, worse at expressing, needs and love and kindness and like being comfortable enough to have like female friendships like I have with Kenna, like being able to have that kind of friendship was something that would have been lost on me even 10, 15 years ago. Whereas, when you really start to, and I think this happens, like the flip side of this is women get repressed, men get, what's the word I'm looking for? I think repressed is also fair. Like Kenna once told me, like the patriarchy hurts everybody. It hurts women and men. And one of the ways I think it's hurt men is that romantic feelings are completely shuttered. Like you were not really expected. You're expected to be horny, but not romantic. And then women are expected to be romantic, but not horny. And it's just a really gross way of like forcing people into these boxes. And when I look back on it, I've really always loved romance as like an industry, as a like theme, as a story. Learning about people falling in love, and even like in video games I play. I talked about this recently, but I think my earliest exposure to like romance that I was really into was the Final Fantasy series, which always had these like really big sweeping like romantic stories. And at the time as a kid, I'm like, I love these games because I'm beating up monsters. But really, you know what I remember about those games? The scene where Tidus is in the water and he's about to kiss his girlfriend, and there's like fireflies.
The water and the glowing. Yes.
And the romance between Squall and what's her face, Tifa, and like all of those are not Squall and Tifa. Squall was Renoa or something. I don't remember. Anyway, it's been too long. But these like really deep romantic elements are happening at the same time that this story is going on. I remember there's this piece of Final Fantasy VIII where they go to space for no reason, and there's like a whole space romance scene where they're like out in the drifting off into space, and he comes out and he saves her and he brings her in. I can't tell you half the story, but I will always remember that scene because of how romantic and dynamic and interesting it was, and how lovely it was that he went out to save her and he cared about her so much and he'd grown so much as a character. That's romance. But if I told any of my friends about that, like, I would have been ridiculed and made fun of. You're not allowed to be romantic as a guy.
They'd be like, well, did he fuck her?
Yeah. Well, did you get to fuck her after? Like, did she take off her clothes in the game? What's up?
Do you see boobs? Do you see a nip slip?
GTA lets me go to strip clubs. Like, let me, like that's that's the kind of difference between those two. But I really do think a lot of men have that same experience, like when they were younger, like experiencing romance in novels, or a lot of guys will read fantasy novels when they're young and they'll have like romantic elements. And they forget about, over time, you may not remember every single fight or battle or whatever, but you definitely remember that romance because that is a human thing. It sticks in your brain because it's probably the most human thing that we do is like love and fall in love and experience, lust and romance and those types of things. It is incredibly human. It's the thing we cling to the most.
Absolutely.
And people just don't, they're not allowed to experience that, and so they repress it a lot.
Do you feel that religion, and I know you kind of touched on that a little bit, but do you think that largely religion in general has been one of the larger oppressing entities for that?
I don't want to, let me speak on it from a historical perspective, because I think I want to be really clear that people have all kinds of beliefs. They can believe whatever they want. I don't think there's any one subset of religion or ideology that like specifically that's their goal, right? Is to oppress sexuality. I don't think that's ever like the intent. Their first goal is to, whatever the doctrine of their faith is. But I also went to school to be like a biblical scholar, and I have a seminary degree, so I have kind of a deeper understanding of the history around it. So sexual oppression is something that is in Judeo-Christian faiths, absolutely was part of the culture makeup, absolutely was part of the point. Like, in particular, the Abrahamic faiths are big on like female sexual repression. Like that was a big element of it for a long time. That isn't, I don't think anybody would argue with that fact that historically that's always been a problem. Right. And I grew up in a culture where it was still a very common, like, they did, I don't know if any of you are familiar with like disciple nows. Like that was a thing when I was a kid. You'd go and like stay at somebody's house for a weekend, and they'd make you feel bad and tell you that if you masturbate, you're going to go to hell. And I don't know if you ever seen
house.
Yes, you would go spend the weekend at one of your friends' house, and a youth leader who's like maybe 20 years old would come in and be like, "Now, guys, if you touch your penises, you're going to go to hell." And like, but then he also like knocked up one of the teenagers. Like,
he's like, "It's okay. I didn't name it penis. Its name's Bob." I
never touched it. I never touched it. It's fine. But like that was kind of what I grew up around. It's like this like really heavy like sexual like if you do this, it's wrong. But also everybody was doing it, right? Like that was the thing that was hard. No one talked about it, and so everyone did it wrong. And by wrong, I mean morally. Like they were morally doing wrong things because they were trying to repress it outwardly and pretend like they were these holy, pure people. I even remember to this day, if you ever heard like the Lifehouse skit where like there's a song that'll come on, I think it's called Everything by Lifehouse, and it's like, you're everything, everything. And it's like a guy, like there's all these guys like trying to pull this woman to the ground, and like they take pieces of her rose away, and then Jesus comes back and gives her a new rose. And it's like talking about how this woman, like whenever she gives away her virginity to men, like she's giving up part of her rose, and only God can restore that. And in some of the versions of the play, Jesus takes the rose and throws it down. Like he can't accept it because she lost her virginity. So I grew up around a lot of that. So,
way to ruin one of my favorite songs. I'm just kidding.
So for me personally, yes, that has been an element of my life. I think for other people, that's not necessarily the case. There are a lot of religions that don't necessarily have that. And there's also just like the history of repressing women is not something exclusive to religion, right? Like that is something that has been in existence in the beginning of time.
Yeah.
I don't think we can lay it all at that feet. It is often justified through, religious organizations.
That's a good explanation. But it was justified. Yeah.
And religion is so funny too, like the way that they feel like they protect people and the way that they, move through stuff. It's so interesting to watch because they're doing it from a place of love, like, right? They're never coming from a place of like, oh, I want to hurt you. They're like, I actually want to protect you. I have this fear that something bad's going to happen to you. And so it's so interesting to watch because so much bad comes out of so much good. And it's just very confusing on how that works.
Yeah, I think there's this is, again, in my experience solely based on what I've been around, what I've experienced is like being trained to be a biblical scholar, working in denominational faith, like high level, that kind of stuff. Like there are kind of two sides of that have always been something that is difficult. There are people who are concerned with power, and there are people who are concerned with like, I'm from an evangelical background, so like souls, like saving souls. And so like love is an element of that for sure, right? Like there was always kind of a piece of that, but there were also people who like, for them, it was power. It really didn't have a whole lot to do with love. They weren't trying to save people. They were just trying to maintain authority in some way or another. And that's not the case for everybody, but it was like a 50-50 split in my experience. So unfortunately.
Now, did you ever study like other religions? Because like I know in like Norse mythology, Sexuality is something that they openly are like, yeah, let's all just have a big old orgy, and the gods, like even some of the gods were, they were open with their relationship and took other partners that were the same gender. And did you experience any of that?
Yeah. So, I mean, I went to a evangelical focused like background seminary. And so there was some of that from the academic level, but very little of it was lived. I took a course where I spent I would go to religious practices with Muslims. I would go to temples with Jewish families and a rabbi I would spend some time with, and so I had some experience in like modern Abrahamic religions, and I learned a little bit about around like Mormonism and some things like that. But the other like anything outside of that were mostly things I taught myself. I learned a lot about ancient Near East, what they call them A&E faiths, so like Babylonian, Zoroastrianism, a lot of that kind of stuff, which has a lot of like very strong parallels to modern Judeo-Christianity because of the fact that like a lot of our faith traditions come from Babylonian faiths, like the god Yahweh is part of their pantheon. It wasn't like abnormal for them. So yes, in a way, but at the same time, like sexuality was always it's always been a little bit of a power dynamic. And for the Vikings, I think a big piece of that was that they were largely matriarchal. So like having orgies wasn't as much of a problem because the power over women wasn't as big of a question, right? Like that women made the financial decisions for most of them in those cultures. They had like a lot of control, whereas like you look back at Babylonian faith, it was still very much like, women were still oppressed and like they just stayed home and like weren't allowed to do much else. And so there's all these rules around like, they weren't allowed to have dildos and stuff like that. Like there are like very specific rules about like they're not allowed to do anything fun. Like, oh, okay, well, that's me.
Yeah. And what's kind of crazy is like, so many women, they get experience all these pleasures from audiobooks and all this different stuff, but in today's society, there are still women who, like you said, are not allowed to have these things. They are shamed for it, and
Yeah.
their religion actually just still today, they're second class citizens in a lot of areas.
Yeah. I mean, even in the sense that like, you go into a Barnes and Noble, which I think everyone can kind of admit like bookstores are generally more femme spaces, right? Like I think everyone kind of has that feeling. But at the same time, women know when they go into a bookstore when they're looking at like romance or smutty books, they have to keep their heads up. You know what I mean? Like that's the kind of oppression that I think even today we still feel. Like somebody might judge you, somebody might mock you. I know that if I had like family members or like people I've known from my past who wanted to go buy a smutty book, they would either do it in secret or they would if they didn't feel like know how to order it online for whatever reason, they would be like in disguise to go buy this book because they just still feel so oppressed around that type of thing. So it is definitely something that we still deal with so much. But it is freeing, right? Like that's the great thing about romance is it opens up the doors to a lot of like, you can be this, it's okay. Even some of the craziest stuff you've ever heard. You want to have sex with a balloon? Sure, I don't know. Yeah, go. His name is Squeak. He's adorable. I don't know. Or there's the one about the like milking the balloon monster, whatever. There's a lot of it. Like there's crazy stuff. Like you can read whatever you want. You can have all this kind of like freeing, opening experience that a lot of people will just continue to shut down and say, "Oh, this is wrong. It's hurting society." Is it? No.
I think one of the other pluses is that because women historically have been suppressed in that, they don't know because they never were taught, nor did they learn in a safe manner what is a healthy, normal, I want to say normal relationship.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so it opens them up to vulnerability to getting into bad relationships. And,
Yeah.
they're into the toxic ones that their naivete is exploited, I guess. Maybe not intentionally exploited, but it does happen. And so then then they find themselves in these abusive relationships or whatever. And so I love that the romance community also explores the red flags. And, yes, there's the dark romance that, you know, like every single red flag is like an automatic buy for a bunch of people, which fair. That's cool. But you know what I'm saying? Like it still allows women to learn, oh, this is okay for me to enjoy, you know, this or that. And so I love that about it.
Yeah, I mean, sexual like education taught to women has been something that is relatively, when you look at like history, is pretty new. Like I think we only officially started doing it in most of the U.S. in the 80s, maybe a little bit in the 70s, but like even just the bare minimum of like what is it like to have a monthly like, you know, hormonal change, what's it like to have a period, like those things weren't taught in schools at all for a number of years. And the assumption, of course, I think was that people were doing it at home, but they were educating men in schools in the 50s and 60s about that, even I think some places in the 40s. And so women's sexual, like access to sexual information and access to sexual education has been repressed for women for a long time. And I hope, I think it's nice that when the floodgates open, right? Like that's good. You want people to have access to information. I do worry sometimes that like young women who don't have a lot of experience in relationships will like pick up Haunting Adeline and be like, oh yeah, this is
Right.
great. And you know, you don't want that. Like,
No.
I don't think that happens very often. I will say that, but I do think there are, you know, elements of that, like, you know, people who look at dark romances like very early on and maybe don't have that kind of experience to framework it in. But I also like, I don't know, the early internet had taught me all kinds of things I shouldn't have known. So I don't know where that line really is for people.
I think that's a fair thing to say, though, that you know, that there is definitely age appropriateness for some of these things. And while, you know, one could say, oh, you know, 16, 17-year-old girls or, you know, more mature or whatever, honestly, in that realm of understanding that, you know, kidnapping and I can't even remember everything in Haunting Adeline, but it was...
I think the gun part is the worst part.
The gun part, yeah. I mean, there's some seriously fucked up shit in that book. I mean, it's a great book. I listened to it, but, you know, like, whew, I mean...
We love Teddy here. It's fine.
Yeah. But maybe that might not be appropriate for someone to be able to separate in those moments fiction from real life.
Right. And even just teaching like healthy relationship, like a healthy sexual relationship conversation with teenagers is something that a lot of parents aren't having at all, period.
They don't, because they don't have it.
Right.
They don't have the tools for it.
Right. And then I think on top of that, like maybe I think the Unitarian Church has like a whole thing they do about healthy sexual relationships and things like that. But outside of that, I'm trying to think of an organization that does this well. And I don't know of anyone who does.
I can't think of one.
Especially for
can
women.
You imagine people trying to teach something that they never learned themselves? Like, it's just like throwing stuff at the wall and seeing what sticks. Or let's check the next generation and see how that affected them. Now we can...
Right. And like the thought of having like a 21-year-old walk into like a BDSM dungeon and be like, this is going to be okay. Or even worse, some of them allow 18-year-olds like to go into a place like this. Like the absolute insanity of someone feeling like that would be a potential place for them to be, or luckily now this is not true of all of them, but luckily a lot of people in that community are savvy, kind, and will look at somebody who is like that and be like, you don't belong here. Go live, please, first.
Yeah.
Come back.
But that is not always the case. Right. And that is not always the case, right? Like that is part of life, that people fall into these things. And like I've done that, right? Like we all make these mistakes and fall down these paths, and you know, it's not always a good thing where you end up like repressing yourself or, you know, trying to get into things that you don't really understand or whatever. But the other half of that is really that we just don't have a good way of teaching people, especially women, like healthy sexual boundaries, healthy sexual relationships. I'm talking a lot, but I am hopeful that I hear like people talk a lot about consent nowadays, which is something that we weren't talking about even 10, 15 years ago.
No, agreed.
Whereas now we have a lot of conversations around like consent is important. I have kids, even just the basic stuff. I have 2 boys. We talk about like, if someone says stop, you stop. If someone says no, you stop. Like it is an important thing that we teach people.
It starts outside of the sexual stuff. Like if you are tickling someone and they say stop. Like that's something that, like, I agree with you, teaching our kids, like, it's not just in the sexual scenario, it is understanding boundaries in general.
Self-control and boundaries are things that we learn as young kids that I think, at least for me, like, I don't know that was taught very well to my generation. And I don't know that it's been taught very well in the past.
My generation.
Right. And then, like, I think the further back you get, the less likely it was to have been taught at period. Like, the things I hear sometimes from coworkers or friends who are older who will tell me a story, I'm like, that's fucked up. Are you okay? And they're like, no, it was funny. I'm like, no, it wasn't. Are you okay? Like, what do you mean? Do you have a therapy appointment scheduled for Thursday or Friday? Like, what are you talking about?
Maybe you should bump it up to twice a week.
Yeah, good God. No, I mean, but, like, I think that's something that people grew up hearing a lot of, like, oh, all this boundary crossing and, like, oh, this happened, but I'm fine now. And you're like, I don't think you are. It sounds like, based on the conversation we just had, you're definitely not. You just dropped that during a business meeting. So definitely that can't be healthy for you to be having this conversation, because that's crossing my boundary if I didn't want to hear about that today.
Which is also part of consent, by the way.
Right. Yeah. I want to not hear that.
But the suppression side of it, like, they have suppressed it so much that it just, like, it comes out. And I'm sure that later on they're like, oh my God, I can't believe I said that in front of people I barely know. But because of the suppression element of it, it just like bubbles out in most inappropriate times.
Right. And I do think I don't even know that some people, at least for most people I've talked to that have had that experience, where I can't even, like, hold up a number of fingers that could tell you how many times it's happened in a conversation where I'm, like, having a business meeting or a conversation with someone out, like, in public, and they're just like, this happened, and I'm like, holy shit, are you sure you just wanted that here? Okay, all right. But then they didn't seem to, like, regret that at all. And I think a big part of that, again, goes back to, like, the repression aspect of it, the lack of education around boundaries, and again, that, like you said, that starts very early around, like, when somebody tells you they don't want you to do something, you shouldn't do it. Like, it's not funny. Like, a lot of this stuff around bullying is something that I think people had never really considered, because a lot of people were like, I mean, I got beat up all the time. Like, I was a football player in high school. I got, into fights, and bullying was like it was something that we did as part of two-a-days. We had a day where the seniors would bully all the freshmen. It was just a thing that was allowed to happen. And no one thought twice about it. It was encouraged. Yeah. It was a thing we did to celebrate the end of two-a-days, was get beat up, basically, at the pool. And we didn't think about that. And then the next year, one of the kids, after I went through it, one of the kids threatened to sue. Their mom threatened to sue over this, like, bullying act this hazing act they were doing. And I never thought twice about it. I went to college my freshman year of college. They had this big event for all the welcoming freshmen that was optional. It was the first year it was optional. Before that, it'd always been kind of, like, required. And it was a huge hazing ritual where you had to, like, slide through mayonnaise and, all these condiments and, like go through all this bubble stuff. It was terrible. It was gross degrading. And nasty. And it was so degrading. It was weirdly, like, publicly humiliating in a way that, like, I look back and I'm like, oh, I thought that was so funny, but that was fucked up. Like, that's really weird that people, like, hundreds of kids just went and did this. Like, that's normal. My parents did it. It's fine. Like,
the attention that they get from it, though, you know what I mean? Like, it's filling some sort of void that they don't have. Like, you're getting attention. You're getting, like, oh yeah, ha ha ha. You build this connection with these people through a negative aspect that it's so unhealthy, because they're lacking what they really need, is just genuine connection.
Yeah, and I do think that's a big piece of, like, this is another thing I really like about the romance and just general, like, book people, honestly, is that I think more of them want to build a community around positive aspects than want to build a community around negative aspects. Because a lot of communities, if you think about it, are really built around the things we don't like, right? We don't like this, we don't like that, we don't want these people here, we don't want those people here, we don't want this element, we don't want that. And then they build these communities and they build their walls and they build their suburbs or whatever, and that's how we, like, separate ourselves, is by the things we don't want. Versus, like, the romance market, a lot of the time it's about what I do want. What are the tropes I love? What are the flags that I want to see in a book that I want to read in a dark romance? Like, what is something, do I like monster romance? Like, you start to think more about what you do want. And of course there's elements of, like, what you don't want, but most people don't take those people and go, like, I don't like those people. Now, that does happen outside of the community and everything else, but I think there's a big element of saying, like, this is what I do want. It's an inclusive feeling. I also think that's common to femme spaces generally, where they, as that kind of grows out, women are like, this is what I want to include in my life, not what I want to not include.
Well, and it's a big shift from the woman side of things. It is definitely this shift, because if you think about in the past, like whenever women were having to seclude so much of themselves, it was the other women shaming them that kept them in check. And that was what was really hard, is like, as we develop relationships with women now, it's hard for a lot of us women who are like, I've never had a woman in my life that talked to me in a positive way that wasn't shit talking someone else or making me feel bad about what I'm doing. And so just readjusting, like you said, changing it into this positive side of things where we talk about what we do like, it's great, and I encourage it. And that is, I think, the healthiest way to kind of alter society in a big way.
Yeah. I mean, I think we all grew up like either being or knowing those people who, like, when your best friend would be the person that you hated the most in the world. Like, you would be spending all this time with this person, and they are just either shit talking you behind your back, shit talking you to your face a lot of the time. Just like, oh, you're going to wear that. Or, for guys, a lot of the time it's like, quit being a, bad word, like, quit being this, quit being that, like, get tougher. Like, a lot of it was bullying for us, I think, growing up. And that's something I've been encouraged by seeing. I of course, there's still a big element of that, but I see more when I see more teenagers in public. A lot of the time, they are having conversations that are more positive. It's not always the case, but I think we've also we've segmented like the things that we like, because of the internet. We've all started to say, like, I like this. This is part of my identity. So like, there are, when I was a kid, being an anime kid would have been a bad thing. But now, you can be an anime kid, have a whole community of people. Oh, I know, trust me, I saw the Pokeballs and the Luffy hat. I clocked you a mile away. There was like a whole thing around, like, you can now have these interests and find a big community of people to go spend time with. Even if you just like really like Supernatural, the TV show, because Dean is the hottest or whatever. Like, you can be that person and find a community you build around that.
Team Dean all the way.
All right, it's fine. It's fine. The other one's hot too.
But the aspect of teaching our kids to become these more like understanding and like, that's something we work really hard in our family. Is my kids are very emotionally aware. They are very aware of how they act and how other people act. On the same side of that, it isolates the hell out of them. Like, when my kid is like, hey, we can't bully people like that, or we, you know what I mean? It sucks.
No,
it's
absolutely,
like, we can't fucking win as parents, because our kids are very healthy and they understand their emotions and they check other kids, and then other kids are like, fuck you, dude, we're not being friends with you. And so it's like, damn.
So I live in a very small town, and it comes with all of its normal, very small town problems. And my kids play athletics and all that kind of stuff. And so having moved here from, I was in a large metropolitan area before we moved here and had kids. And it's one of my kids now. There is a big element of that, of like, we want them to like stand up for themselves. We want them to establish healthy boundaries, even physical boundaries, like, whenever things happen that are physical and cause them problems. We want all of that, but at the same time, them to be mindful and open of other people's boundaries, to not, it is so hard, because you really are, we're kind of raising against the village versus like in a village nowadays. And that's something that I think is really tough too, around like, all of us are trying to like make the best world that we can in our small space. And sometimes the world around us does everything it can. This is actually a good analog for the book community. I think the book community, especially online, wants to build a very positive, healthy, like, we're all welcome here. We're all allowed to have our interest here. Have your kinks. We don't care what they are. Go have fun. Here's all this fun stuff to enjoy. And then people come from outside the community and go, ooh, y'all are gross. Or, ooh, you're being gooners, or whatever. They love to like say all those weird terms. And like, here's all this stuff that y'all are doing that we don't like and we think y'all are bad. And it's so funny how, like, whenever you try to build a positive community or a positive, like, small, segment of it, people challenge that at every single step. I think the best you can hope for is that it just keeps doing its own thing and stays who it is. Like, that's what I hope for my kids, at least. Like, please keep being good and get bigger and be a good person. That's all I want.
Yeah. I think that, because the big thing from what I've seen is that people who don't read the romance or the spicier romance, or like, oh, well, that's just porn. You're just reading porn. And it's like, okay, but you go and watch porn. So why are you judging me for, there's always, I don't know why society has to always, we're so judgmental. Our society's, people are so judgmental.
Well, if you want to say to yourself, like, this is porn to me, okay, that's fine.
Yeah.
You can say that. But if you want to say, like, what you're doing is wrong because, and even if it is pornographic, if you want to say, like, what you're doing is wrong because it's pornographic, that's not up to you, buddy. Like, that's the thing that gets me is, like, it's so hard sometimes for people to just, like, exist when they see something that doesn't meet what they want it to be. When they look at something like, oh, no, everything needs to be, everything needs to be Tolkien, or everything needs to be, like, a great Russian master, or everything needs to be Shakespeare. And, like, a lot of the time I want to just, like, throw Shakespeare in people's face and be like, he was just writing about fucking and big butts the whole time. Like, it's just it's fine. Just leave it alone. But, people don't want to hear that because they're the people who are typically doing this aren't reading anyway. They're, the people who have negative opinions about romantic books are typically not people who are reading. There are people who are reading who don't like those books. But in most cases I've run into readers who don't like romance just don't talk about it. They don't care. They're like, sure, y'all go do your books. That's fine. I got my books over here. Brandon Sanderson's hit me every 6 months, baby. I got this going.
I just finished the 4th book in that series, and oh my god, it's so fucking good. And talk about a series that makes you take it from the book and apply it to your real life. Like, I look at religion completely different now because of those books, and it's not because he has a set, it's not a religious book, but holy shit, he's good.
He kills me. I'm so far behind at this point on his series because I'm constantly prepping and trying to I'm just working all the time. The only books I read nowadays are the books that I'm gonna read out loud. So I'm stuck there. But
what book series was that?
It's the what's it called? He just released
The Mistborn.
Yes.
Or are you talking about a different one?
I was thinking of Mistborn, but there's one he just put out too that I think.
I haven't got that far yet. Yeah, I'm balls deep in the Mistborn series right now, so it's so good.
Mistborn is, I think, 13 or something. It's a lot of books. Anyway, I don't remember how many, but it's
I'm on
very
5.
good. It's very good.
I thought it ended at 3, and then I was like, wait a minute, there's more?
The thing I really love about fantasy too is everybody can do it, and it can be different and unique and good in its own way. Like romance can do fantasy, great. Stephen King can do fairy tale, and it's great. Everybody can kind of write fantasy in their own way. It's one of those things that I think you can just throw somebody at and be like, I bet you could write fantasy, and then it ends up being pretty good. It's crazy how people can do that. But then you got Brandon Sanderson, who you can't put him anywhere else. That's all he could do. It's so good. I don't want him to not write fantasy. He has to stay there.
Yeah, I feel like even if he tried to do a thriller or a horror, it would end up a fantasy. It would just
become
happen.
Paranormal to it would mainline itself right into fantasy. There's just no way around it. He would isekai the shit out of that thing. It would just be they would be in New York and suddenly they would be in Arcadia.
This dude just got portaled from a fucking closet into Neverland.
Truck Coon just takes him out. He's like, oh, well, Brandon Sanderson's in fantasy again. We can't get away from it. But I love that, right? You write what you're good at, but you also think there are genres that I think everybody can write into at least. And I think fantasy is the one that no offense to people who are fantasy purists are going to be very mad that I'm saying this. They're going to be like, no more fantasy. But fantasy's one of those things because you can apply whatever world set of rules you want to it. It can be anything. 40K, and in my mind, even though it's sci-fi, is a fantasy story series of chaos and destruction and body horror and terrible things. It's a lot of genres, but it is one of those things that when you get into the kind of lore of it, it really is more fantasy than it is anything else. It's just big knights fighting just big demons. It's kind of that's a big part of it. Not really. Don't come for me, 40K fans. I'm going to piss off every fan of every genre I can find.
That's okay. We already talked about how you have this good strategy of pissing them off just enough to come and listen to the rest.
Yeah, come listen to me make really bad takes about every single thing in the world and hate me for all my beliefs. It's fine. It's okay.
So was it your wife that got you into narrating?
It was. So I like I said, I'd done kind of some voice acting a long time ago. I was working for a tech company that was on death's door, like a lot of tech startups. It was doing something really, really great. it wasn't getting, it was like they missed a funding point because they thought like, oh, it's the recession. And then this is what all tech startups did like 2 years ago. They're like, oh, we're going to wait until the recession slows down and inflation calms down and we'll all get money after. And then, they never lowered those numbers. And so it just really, it dropped like half the startup market just died. And so this company was on its way, on its last legs. I saw it coming, and I was talking to my wife, and she was listening to some book be narrated by somebody, and it was brutal. I listened to a little bit of it. I was like, this is miserable to listen to. And she's like, I bet you could do this. You have a good, like, kind of calming voice, but you can also do a lot of voices. Because I would read books to the kids, and I was trying to be a voice editor at one time, so I would do all these different voices. I have a naturally Southern accent, so I'm like accidentally masking it now. I actually talk kind of like this. This is kind of how like my natural like accent is, but I cover it accidentally. It's not on purpose. I just kind of do it. And then I'll slip right back out of it. So I was like, I bet I could do this. And so I started looking into it. I found I think it was a country romance book that I started to do. And I was like, oh, I'm going to have to like get into this a little bit more. This is more complicated than I thought. I'm going to have to like get a better mic. I sound so bad. And so I started getting into the tech of it. I started getting doing a lot of research. And the thing I really fell into whenever I first started looking into it is like, I think I only have about 5 years before AI really just like eats this market. Which at the time, like I thought I was like, I didn't have any feeling anyway about how that was going to go out. Right. Because I wasn't invested in this field. I didn't know anything about it. I was just fact finding. I was like, there's like 3 or 4 big guys who do romance voices. Troy Duran, Teddy Hamilton, a few others. There are a few big voices, and then everybody else kind of like hovers around them. And I bet like I could make a career of this because there's a lot of mid-market guys. I bet I could get in there. And I started doing it, and then I realized like, I'm probably going to have to like invest my time in other things too to make sure if this does happen, like I can get to where it is where I'm safe and my voice is relatively protected. And the thing I thought would be smart is to do erotica, because I thought, what AI can do well is mirror voices, and it can do like fantasy novels. People aren't going to mind having an AI voice or whatever. Like there's a lot of that kind of stuff. Romance and erotica are the 2 spaces that are going to be harder to emulate because in romance, they want the right kind of voice. And in erotica, they want the breaths, the pauses, and a lot of the time, the immersive elements of it too. And those things are hard for AI to do well because it's a really creative thing.
And it's emotional.
And so it's a very important connection. You're actually like trying to live as the character in those moments and like emulating that kind of like, something that you think would, make people excited and bring pleasure and all those kinds of things like that. That's something that AI probably won't be able to figure out for a number of years. And even if they do, this is a deep pull. Have you ever watched or played Cyberpunk? Do y'all know what I'm talking about when I say that?
I know what you're talking about. I haven't played it, but it's on my list.
Okay, so I don't know about the game. I haven't played it. The anime you should watch. It is maybe my top 10 in the last 10 years. It is one of the best animes I've seen in a very long time. It is sad, FYI. But it imagines a future where there's everything is cyberpunk, basically. There's a lot of body augmentation and all that kind of stuff. And there's a moment in it where there's this there are a lot of these rich men who go into these places and have these memories implanted in their heads from other people. They have people go live out these experiences, and then they have these memories implanted in their head. And I thought, what an interesting analog for what niche content might be in the future, where obviously God, I hope it's not that, but the idea around specific creators, VTubers are getting big, or have been big for a number of years now, that kind of very niche, this person who isn't necessarily real to you, but exists, is making this very niche content and you like it and are willing to pay for it. And I was that's something that I think will always exist. I don't think that's going away. And so it's very dark in that show, but in my mind, I was I bet a big piece of that is erotica. I think that's something that people will not want to hear robots doing, right? Some people will, for sure, but I think the majority of people won't. And so that's the kind of I started going that direction at first. That's kind of what early on funded my ability to get access to microphones and everything else. And then I started developing better and better audiobooks until I made All Hallows Haunt, where I did a full. I produced all my own audiobooks so far, so I did that one as well, and it has immersive elements. I actually had a high quality mic for that book, and like it was my first like I'm really getting this right, and doing a good job. And now I won Dark Star with it, and so that's opened up a lot of doors for me to like get into other stuff. Where I have a lot of books.
Was that like I made it, I broke through the doors moment when you won that award with Dark Star?
Weirdly, no.
Let's talk about Dark Star first. So how did you find out about that?
So I had someone sent it to me. I wish I could remember who, but someone sent me a link to it. They're like, "Hey, there's this contest," and I'd never even I'd heard of Troy Duran. I knew who he was. I didn't know what his production company was called, and I definitely didn't know about the convention or the contest. So when I got it sent to me, it may have been Maven who sent. I don't know. It was somebody sent it to me, and I was like, "Oh, I'll do this." I have less than 10 audiobooks, which was the requirement. And I have a romance voice that I speak in naturally. So I was like, that's perfect. I'll just do that. And when I did it, I thought like, maybe I got a chance. Maybe I get in the top like 20, 10. There's like 150 people who did it. So I thought like, maybe top 10, I'll pick up a few books from it. That'd be great. Like, I'd love that. And as it kept going, like I realized that the advice I was getting from people who like Jen, and people like, and the things that like Teddy said about my voice, and Troy would like spend time with us, I was like, I could be better at this than I have realized. I've just kind of been like talking seductively at microphones and like I did a lot of werewolf books. So I was like, I'm a werewolf now. Like I was doing a lot of that stuff. And I realized like, there's a lot more I could be doing to this that would really pull people in to listen to these audiobooks if I can get it right. And that was what really took me down this path of like, I need to start training, getting coaching. I need to start doing all this stuff, which I started doing during the Dark Star contest. And that kind of grew into like, I felt like I was maybe getting better and better the whole time. That was the one thing I feel like I can point to in Dark Star and say, when I started off, my audition was like, meh. And by the end of it, I felt like I actually like had emotion in my voice, and I was actually like doing what needed to be done to be a real good narrator. So it was great. I loved it.
The progression of the contest, that you definitely progressed for sure.
Yeah. I still don't feel like I should have won it because that's a me thing. I have that kind of personality where I'm like, I didn't deserve that. But at the same time, I felt like if there was a best, most improved, I feel like I would be at least up for that award, maybe. Because I started off just like, hi, I'm Ethan Gray. I'm here to talk to you about how you should be in love with my voice, and it's so good. And then by the end of it, I'm like actually like feeling out scenes and talking about how like I love this woman, and like I felt like it was actually, I was proud of the work that I was doing. I was like, this is actually, maybe I'm good at this. Maybe I'm actually, like by the end of it, I felt like maybe I'm actually good at this. And that was a lot due to Troy and the people I worked with through the process of coaching me and using my own voice. I have like 6 drinks. I don't know how many of them you've seen so far, but this is my 3rd.
I've got 2, so you're good. We're like,
I'm a drink
water
goblin.
And my pop, so.
Yeah.
But Randy, to answer your question, I think that this is not a reflection on Dark Star or anything else. This is a me thing. For me personally, like to feel like the door has like popped open and like I'm actually gonna be, this is a thing that I'm gonna do. I think I'd have to be able to be like 100% full time in the market. Like Brandon Francis, if you know who he is, absolutely fantastic narrator, great guy.
He's amazing.
He recently said something about how he's been able to go full time. He just got a book with CJ Bloom, I believe, and he's going to be doing a huge like Christmas book with her. He is fantastic, and that's where I think of it as like that's when I feel like will have made it. Whenever I can do this, and like this is my only job, I have enough money that I am functioning as a human in society. And again, like I think that's a very like capitalistic thing that's been like put onto my personality over time of like I have to be productive, I have to earn money for me to feel like I'm actually doing something of value, which sucks because I am a very creative, like I love what I do. I love making like the immersive audio book that I did for Kenna with All Hallows Haunt was like my like love letter to like that book of like I want this to make people cry, I want it to make people excited, I want people's pulse to go up. And I've had a number of people reach out to me now and say like this scene where you put this music in while they're walking and he's talking about his little sister like made me cry. I'm like, good. That's what I fucking wanted you to do.
Immersive books are literally that. Like when I found my first immersive book, I was like, where has this been my whole life? Screw movies, screw reading, screw everything. Like, when you can actually picture it in your own head and you're the director, but also here's these voices and it sets the scene for you. Holy cow. Talk about magical.
It's so like, it's Wild Westy and kind of like purely creation right now, which is what's so fun about it too. There are no rules, right? Like, nobody is mixing those super well. There are high-end production studios that do those that sound terrible because the mixing is so weird. And it's not anybody's fault, right? It's just that nobody really knows how to do this super well. And so that was kind of my goal with that. And that's something that I hope, like, I'd love to do more of it, but I also don't want to, like, it takes a really long time to go piece by piece, mix this audio in, make it sound clean. And I'm not an engineer. Like, I was just trying to make it sound right. And the same thing's true of Erotica too. Like, a lot of like, if you look at Quinn, a lot of their stuff has immersive elements, and there are people who just do the, like, there's rain falling while they're walking or whatever, and then there are people who, like, it is a production. And, like, you know, Andrew Scott did a big one, the guy from Fleabag, who, like, there is, like, full-blown immersive audio. It's scripted. He's, like, a really impressive actor. There's that kind of stuff that I think is probably the future of, like, audio and audiobooks, is this kind of, like, audio drama mid-place, especially in romance, where a lot of scene setting is really helpful for the story. Like, I listened to I think it's Stephen King who did Fairy Tale, whoever it was. And I wish it had immersive elements so badly. It was such a good book, but I would have loved to slow it down and, like, hear what's happening in the story. That would have been fantastic.
I have a couple questions. One about the immersive. Why do, because I have a couple of books that are immersive audio, but I kind of started listening to it and I was like, meh. Like, okay, but where's Teddy? Or where's, you know, Troy? Like, where are my fucking favorite narrators?
Where's Ethan?
Yes, Ethan, where are you? Ethan, please come into my book.
That may have been very loud in your ears. I'm sorry. It wasn't. I put that, like, right on my face.
You know what I'm saying? Like, none of my favorite narrators do that. It's like some rando person, which I'm sure they're great and fabulous, but I don't know them and they're not my favorite. And so why are they reading my favorite book or one of my favorite books? The actual audio book.
Kathy's gonna start hiring you guys to reread her favorite books.
I'll tell you a couple of things I think that are happening with this. One is it's expensive, right? Like, it's more expensive than when you look at what, like, to make an actual audio drama, like, really, really good, you have to hire a multicast group. So we're talking about, I don't know, 4 to 8 people, depending on how big the project is. And then you need to have like multiple engineers, because at that point you're talking about, you need a vocal engineer, you need somebody who's doing the immersive sound. If it's a longer book or a longer, like, audio drama, you're talking about needing, like, you know, multiple audio engineers who are going to go through and produce it if you're going to do it fast enough. I'm just talking audiobook with one narrator, you're bing bang, you're done, right? That is easy to do. You can clean it up in batches. You don't have to listen to the entire audiobook in sync with, like, trying to plan things out. And a lot of, like, sounds that are created for, like, free on the internet are not the best quality of stuff. And so a lot of guys who are, if they're passionate about this, they're creating their own Foley, and that's hard. Like, it's not, for All Hallows Haunt, I did about 50-50. I would use free, like, completely royalty free, open source, you know, non-credited, you know, musical bits and things like that. There's, like, a scene where the main character is listening to, or the main male character is listening to a song in his headphones as the girl walks up to him in college. I, like, found a very, like, no attribution necessary kind of thing to put in his ear. But it was so hard to find something that I thought he would listen to, because he's kind of an alt rock sounding dude. And, like, to find that for free, that I don't have to, like, I can't go out and find a band to hire to do that. Right. Like,
right.
That's where it gets complicated, that you have to add a lot of people, a lot of elements, or you have to add some really good, like, Foley artists, which are also really hard to find, because half of them are, like, in Hollywood. So it's
another
tough.
piece to it too is, like, you can't listen to those on 2 speed. Like, it ruins the aspect of the dramatized piece of it, because and that's how I consume a lot of my audiobooks, is I listen to it way quicker, and you can't do that with the dramatization.
No, you can't at all. And that's the thing too, is I think it takes like half your market and says like anybody who does a 1.5 speed or above is out. Like they're not going to listen to this.
See, I
And
can't do
so,
that. I listen to my books normal speed. Talk to me like a normal person.
yeah.
No.
I mean, you're the perfect market fit for that. But again, like you look at, what is it, Fahrenheit 451? Is that the famous one that just came out from Audible not long ago that has Andrew Garfield in it? I think it was, no. It was Big Brother. What is Big Brother? Anyway, there's one that came out with Andrew Garfield that's like famous because there's a scene where he's getting shocked and a lot of people liked that part because he's like moaning at it. Anyway, like that's the kind of production you can do if you have Audible money, right? If you want to do, and I think that's where this is the challenge for a lot of people, and this is why it's the Wild West. If you're Audible and you want to do a Audible exclusive, big audio drama that's going to make a ton of money, and you can invest in putting Andrew Garfield and big name actors into it, you can do that. If you're on the Erotica side, if you're Quinn, you can hire Andrew Scott and all these other big name actors to say like, you come in, do one, we're going to script it for you, we'll like do all this stuff for you, we'll put all the immersive. You can invest in those high end things. Everything below that is just impossible, right? Like it's either you have to find someone who is really good at this, someone who's going to make it sound good enough, which is what I feel like I did, is I made it sound good enough. Like I'm not a producer. I tried my best. And then, there's also the last element of like, how much is it going to cost you? And that's really the hardest part of that, is that like, there's nobody above really top market who is going to be able to sell these in a way that makes sense. But a lot of people who do audio erotica have been doing this for the last like 5 to 10 years, where they've been putting some kind of sounds into it. And so those people are really gifted at this. And so that's where I kind of see like maybe some of this is going to come out of more, is it'll bleed across from the audio erotica space of like, they know how to blend and mix that audio in a way that doesn't bother people. And so I think they'll probably come out of that and start making more stuff. But I could be wrong. I have no idea.
You talk about audio erotica. Is that also found on Audible or is that elsewhere?
I'm thinking more of, and this is I don't know where you can specifically call like the line here, but I'm thinking more around like apps like Quinn, Dipsy, people who have their own Patreons who are like producing like basically like role play audios. There's one called Magic Wave. There's a few of these different apps that do this kind of stuff. And the goal being like you're creating a romantic. I think the best analog that most people will be familiar with because it's free is Gone Wild Audio. They will abbreviate GWA on Reddit, where a lot of people for years have just been like going on there, recording themselves and being like, listen to me. God, I'm going to tell you something that I'm embarrassed by, but there's one where this guy put on his Twitter that he was going to fuck a cake on an audio. And I saw it I saw him post it somewhere and I'm like, what is this? And I listened to the first 2 minutes of it and I was like, I can't do this anymore. It was the most terrible experience.
The Zodiac Academy? Do you know what I'm talking about?
Yes, I do. Yeah.
Zodiac Academy, there's that one dude who fucks the cake. And then
it was hard to like, I think I got like 2 minutes into it and I was like, I can't listen to this anymore. I was just curious. I wasn't even interested in it. It was, oh man, it was bad. But I think there's like people who have been doing that for a period of time. That's mostly what I mean when I say audio erotica, is that kind of like, that is still very much Wild Westy too, but Quinn is a really big place that is hiring very big actors. I think a lot of people look at big book talk. Like if you look at, I don't know if you've heard of Young Gravy, the artist, but like he started reading ACOTAR books at his concerts because he knows that's kind of his fan base. That's
smart.
It's becoming it's becoming a much bigger market, and it grows. I think it's going to keep growing every year. But that's mostly what I mean, is that like kind of there's the mainstream element of it, and there's the like Wild West of like there's stuff on Reddit that people are doing that is absolutely insane. That I don't know how I feel about. They can have fun, do their own thing. I don't know. That's not
it's
for
so
me.
funny because like on TikTok and stuff, I'll find guys who are like, they have no interest in being narrators. They have no interest in the book talk world, but they have that voice. And then like one fan's like, hey, read this line for me. And then that blows up. And now this guy has no choice because that's now his following is all the book talk ladies.
Can you just say call to me or fucking girl or something?
Yeah. I mean, I think there's almost like stages of this, right? There's the there's the one segmentation where it's like, this guy he has like a deep voice and he sounds hot, and like he also rides a bike and he looks, I want to call him Zane, maybe, like whatever, he's got like that kind of like vibe. And so people are like, oh, get on, lives and call me a good girl. And he can make a lot of money doing that. Like that's actually, a semi-viable like thing he could do for a little bit. I don't think that lasts very long for most people. I think most people get good girled out at some point because people will move on. Like that's not interesting enough. But then there are people who kind of sideways their way into it, like Markiplier, if you've ever heard of him. He's a YouTube streamer who like has a really kind of sultry voice, and he did something for charity or something. He's like, if y'all do this, I'll do an OnlyFans. And like he had so many people do this thing that he did an OnlyFans. But he, like a lot of people like listening to him, he does this bit where he's like talking to his microphone because he dropped. He's like, be a good microphone for me. Be a good. And like people, I see that clip all the time still to this day. It's been years. And that's the kind of thing that I think you can sideways your way into it. I think there are actors who get into narration because they want to act, and that's another side of it. And then sometimes people are like, you have a sultry voice. And so then you start doing romance, which is where like 80% of the market is for audiobooks anyway, so good for them. And then there's the other half, the audio erotica people, I think, who do it as an art form, who do it not just to like make the kind of like sounds and all that kind of stuff, but there are people who get on there and they like do ASMR and love stories and series. There are a lot of people who've done that for a long time, and they do all kinds of really interesting and crazy things. And a lot of that involves immersive elements, and a lot of it's really creative. It's a really fascinating, I'm not going to go into too much detail, but one thing that I did is one audio was in one ear, one audio was in the other ear. And that was something that people like really liked, that kind of stuff. So that's, it's fun to like get
Did
to
you do it in
with that
two different voices? So like it was almost like a
like someone whispering in your ear.
It
like
was
one guy in
an
one ear, one
MFM
guy in another ear?
audio where like the one guy is like the bull. I'm not going to go into too much detail here, but one
Please
guy.
do.
I don't even talk about where that stuff is all somewhere else. People, it's an open secret. People who know will know what I'm talking about. People who don't, you don't need to know. It's fine. But they, one of them is like the deeper, like angrier voice, and he's just, like, I'm gonna fuck your wife, and you're gonna watch, and you're gonna like. That was like his bit, and the other guy is like taking direction, and I kind of like pitched my voice up, and like that was kind of like the goal there was to like create kind of like a, 2-part audio where like one guy is the dominant one, one's the more submissive one.
For some reason, immediately that brings to my mind like the angel and the devil on your shoulder. Like I don't know why, but that's like, oh, that's.
But in that scenario, which one is the angel and which one's the devil?
Right? I know. Yeah.
I think it depends.
I love those mind fucks. No pun intended.
Lies. You are a liar.
Yeah. But yeah, I think that's the thing that like AI won't be able to replicate anytime soon. I think it's so niche that it's something that people are excited about and interested in, but it's not, I really hope audiobooks don't go the way of the West. It just disappear or get chaotic or whatever. But, everyone is trying to invent some sort of AI solution to the AI, to the audiobook market, because they're realistically like 90+% of books don't have an audiobook. So it is a big market that they know they can capture, and they just need the voices for it. And that's kind of the bummer, is that there are going to be people who take a payout or take royalties or whatever to, create those. And I love that. Look, I love that people who can't read have access to audiobooks, but we already have apps like that. And so it's kind of a bummer that that's gonna start happening. And it's already happening in every other market, like video games, or there's a reason there's a strike right now for voice actors there. They're pushing AI. It's really feels like we're right at the edge of like a lot of this is going to go away. But that's why I think romance is so special.
Don't you feel that because to me, the romance landia, Torso kindly coined that earlier. I feel like they are so feral when it comes to supporting their narrator. Like it's a personal thing, and I think that's like a perfect description. They're feral about it, like, and so even to like I personally will not listen to an audiobook if it's AI. Like, I just won't listen
Oh,
to it.
me either. No, I have no interest in it either.
Yeah. I mean, even though it's like $2 or something, I'm just like, oh wait, why is it $2? Oh yeah. So whenever I buy an audiobook, I always, well, one, because I usually go and I choose my books mostly by my narrators, but
Right.
you know, I won't buy it if it's AI.
Yeah, and I think so. I think that feverish like feralness is maybe distilled best into like high emotion, because as quickly as you can be defended and protected and loved in the career, everyone can turn on you in a heartbeat, right? Like
Yes.
narration is one of those things that there are a lot of emotions wrapped up in. This is also one of the reasons I try very hard to be distant, like from that stuff. I like to not be in the emotional space. I like to not like. I'm not here to like have controversial opinion. What I try to remember is this is a space that I exist in that is not for me, right? Like this is a place where I create a product for people that love this space, but it's not for me, right? Like I'm not creating this. I'm creating it because I love it. I'm creating these new things and exciting things because I think they're cool and I like what I'm doing and I really enjoy it and I love books and I love romance and all that's true. But this is not cis white man space, right? Like that's pretty commonly, at least it's not dominated by. It's maybe the one that's not dominated by that. And so to look at it and say like, I have to remember I'm a guest in this space, and at any moment I could be kicked out. And I think that's true of all narrators. Like there is a lot of positivity around people that you want to keep growing and everything else. It's a lot of negativity around people that when if they do something stupid, say something stupid, do something untoward or whatever, people will come for you and they won't want you to be part of this market anymore. And sometimes for very good reason. Like don't get me wrong, there are scenarios in which that has been a very good thing. And I think it's also sometimes just really difficult because it can create this really high stakes like you know, who's the next? I think it's always like, who's the next book talk guy who's going to get into a scandal? It's just inevitable, right? Like every 3 months, there's some book talk guy who gets like, who does something gross, and it happens all the time. And so I think that's true of it, but I also think there's like an element of, as much as we all want to believe that we would never like fall for AI voices, and as much as we want to believe like this won't happen, Amazon is good at taking a bad idea and making it something that everybody does anyway, right? Like nobody wants that. I'm gonna say okay. Nobody wants your stuff to be made by slave labor, right? But we all know, like, none of us are stupid. We all know what happens with like some of Amazon's stuff, and yet we all still buy it, right? Like we all know that Amazon rips authors off. We all know how much money y'all get, or I mean, most of us who are in the community now, like we know you're getting pennies on the dollar for reads. We know how exploitive KU is. Like we know how exploitive non-exclusive deals are with Amazon. If you don't go exclusive with them, we know how like painful that. There's so much of this that they will exploit. We're all still doing it, right? You know what I mean? Like they're the people in town. They're the people you can do this with, and
Yeah.
there's nobody else. And I think if they're going to use the same business model, I think that's probably what they're going to try to do, is make this to where it is the one pony in town unless you want to pay a surplus.
It's true.
And I think that's unfortunate. I do think that's what's going to happen. I could be wrong, but there's so much capital they could pretty easily scoop up if they just start like emulating good voices. People will take decent payouts, take some royalties, whatever it is, and then you know what? Everybody will feel, for the most part, okay with it. And I don't love that. I probably will never listen to an AI book, but I think there will be niche audiences for that too. I think there will be entire like segments where maybe somebody re-records an entire book in a human voice, and people pay for that. Like I don't know what the future looks like, but I definitely think the vast majority of books will likely be. It'll be so much easier and cheaper at some point to just do it that
So
way.
how do you, as a new narrator, how do you, because you need to grow, you're going to be growing, right? And
Right.
that's going to be largely by readers.
Right.
So how are you, and I know that they kind of touched on this at Dark Star a little bit, the Lemonade Party, but so how are you working to connect to and grow your fan base?
So I'm careful about this again because like I'm reminded that I'm a guest in this space. So something that's very important to me is that I think some people overconnect in this space, like develop very parasocial relationships, which are harmful to both readers and I think a narrator's like time. I think a lot of people get wrapped up in those like parasocial relationships. They stop producing as much stuff, or they start like, what is the like what they used to do back in the day where you'd hire like a musician and like a rich family would just have like a musician and that would be somebody that works for them, like a patron basically. Like people basically kind of become more reliant on that, of just like those kind of parasocial like patron like relationships. And for a lot of people, they'll do one or two books and then that's kind of what they become, is like they're just so plugged into this, they got their own community and then they start doing that. For me, it's about making high quality products, getting better as much as I can. I have a newsletter that you can sign up for that I don't push unless I have a book because I get annoyed by newsletters. So I'm like, hey, every time I have a book, if you're signed up for my newsletter, you'll get an email that says like, hey, I've got a book out. You can go buy it.
I appreciate that. Someone who is spammed by newsletters.
Yeah, and right now, like in where I am in my career is, and the way I'm kind of thinking about marketing is, I make videos that the content I put out, I'm trying to put out to entice authors right now. That's the majority of my audience. I want to build a repertoire of, around 20 to 30 books. Like I want to have that first. That's kind of my goal, is I'm making content where people can see that I'm easy to work with, that I'm fun to work with, that I can do a lot of different voices, that I'm enticing authors. That's my goal right now. And then for readers, I'm hoping that they kind of hear about me through other things and do that. But once I've kind of crested that point where authors know who I am, then I'm going to start focusing more on the reader base of like how, building the community around that, around like having events and social media that kind of match that kind of like desire to build an audience. Because Troy said this before, but this is very true. I think the only way to really become like narrator, a known entity in this space, is to be a one-click buy. Somebody to be like, oh, Ethan's on this, I have to listen to this one. He's going to be so good. But so good doesn't mean like, that like, ooh, baby. Like it's not that like deep voice speaking in their ear. It's being a good narrator, being a good actor, having people believe what you're saying. There will be audios that go around. Sometimes I'm like, God, that's good. And I'm like, oh, it's fucking Teddy. Damn it. Every time it's like, you'll hear something, you'll be like, that's Teddy again. Oh, he's killing me. Because I never recognized it at first. And then I'm like, it's him. Or you'll hear somebody else who's spectacular. I don't want to just harp on Teddy. But he said I have a sexy voice. So I'm going to always brag on him. You'll hear these things go around. You're like, that is really well acted. And that's what it is, right? Like, I want to become a better actor to the point where I can attract more authors. I want to be easy to work with. I want to give people, I want to make it easy to contract with me. I want to make production easy with me. I want to make my rates favorable for the author and all that kind of stuff early on until I can kind of get to the point where people know who I am, and then start building out a community. And the same thing is true of like, that's why I had to have a podcast partially. It partially advertises me to both readers and authors. I've picked up books from Morley Grey's Anatomy. I've picked up readers from Morley Grey's Anatomy. On the other half of things, I have a business where I do the erotica side of things, where I'm not interested in authors, right? Nothing is being scripted. I'm not interested in anybody other than the people who are willing to like go and like, buy the stuff or get on the apps or whatever, because they are the direct audience. So in that scenario, I am doing the I'm going to tell on myself a little bit right now. I have an audio that has 260,000 views from the other day where I'm just going, please, like that, like a couple of times. And it's for some reason has started to like attract a lot of attention. And now I have like, somebody was like putting a straw into a boba and it was my voice. I'm like listening to that. Oh man. I cried laughing for like 30 minutes watching this person as my voice is playing, going like, please, like as they're putting this straw in this boba. Anyway.
Isn't it so funny when you put content out there? It's like, it's no longer yours, right?
No,
like
it's not mine.
there's an essence that it's like, it is someone else's now.
Yeah, and that's that's especially true of that account. Like my Ethan Gray stuff is, again, I'm more focused on authors. Like I want people to know that I'm easy to work with, that I can do a lot of voices, all that stuff. But on the other thing, it's more around like creating audios that people like and that kind of stuff. And then like, if they're interested, they can go hear the more risque stuff somewhere else. And then there are things like, like the mass talk stuff that I have a lot of people use my audios for. Like if you've heard the be a good girl and go buy yourself a book, that audio, that's me. So I've had, I think at this point, 3,000 or 4,000 videos use that. And half of them are just like
Wow.
men in masks, just like, be a good girl, go buy yourself a book. And they're just like doing this the whole time, like,
Right, and they have a mask on, so they don't have to mouth anything. They just have to kind of move their head a little bit.
They're just moving their eyes around like, ooh, yeah, you can't see my eyes, but ew, yeah, be a good, and it's like that. And I have one where I did the opposite, where I was like, you have too many books or whatever. That one's got like 1,000 videos that people of mass talk have made. And so I get things like that sometimes where I'm like, oh my God. And they make me laugh so, I love them. And they make me laugh so hard. And sometimes people are just like cringing at them, and those always make me laugh. But that's the like direct to reader side of things, right? That's the direct to like consumer side of things that I do, knowing that that's that audience, right? For readers, after I've focused really heavily on getting a number of books and really like getting my coaching like solid and getting better at all the accents that I can do and all that kind of stuff, then I will pivot my like space around to like the types of things that I think people connect with in the reader space. It's similar, but it's definitely not the same. And so that's kind of like, I used to do marketing, so this is something that I'm not wholly unfamiliar with, but like you have to build, right? It takes time. And I have like 3 or 4 books that are going to come out in the next few months. And then like, that's kind of the goal right now, is just like work with authors, get as many books out as I can, as high quality as I can do them. And that's kind of the focus for now.
Marketing background is huge, and I don't think a lot of people realize that is a piece of this that is, if you have that down, the rest of it is a lot easier. Like the creation and the creativity, that's the easy side of this stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's the marketing and the what's in right now, what's trending, what's the niche. That's exhausting.
Right. And I think the worst part of it for me is not even that, because you can pay, if you have enough money, you can pay to get like an application that'll tell you all that stuff, right? Like if you have the money for it, that's a different animal. The thing for me is the marketing ops of it, of like, I have a website. I don't want to spend the time, like I'm trying to do acting. I'm trying to be a creative, and I don't want to spend the time like fixing my website. I want to like do all these things, but like my newsletter is very, very like threadbare, right? Like it's very simple. And so a lot of stuff like that it's just like, if I had the time to spend and like really build that stuff up. Yeah. 100. You know who does this really well that I want to brag on is Victoria Connolly. Victoria Connolly is a film narrator who, if you look at her Instagram, a ton of followers. She knows what she's doing. I have a book coming out with her. It's a short story. It's not a book. Called I think it's called My Bodyguard. And she is outstanding as a narrator, incredibly consistent. She sells herself on her masculine voice. Like that's her selling point. And she does it in almost every video. And it's great. And she's very smart. She has it nailed down. She's got a good newsletter. People who like her buy her stuff. And that's what you want as a narrator, especially a film, because it's so much harder as a film narrator to do this. But she can sell a book as like, I will do both sides of the book and you will love it. And she's right. People do. And so she's able to really market that and do a great job of it. Yeah, it's just that kind of stuff is something that I feel like I just never have enough time for. And also it drains me. Like it's the one task that I'm like, okay, I need to go update my website with all the coaches that I've had. Or like, I need to go try to apply to an agency, or like, I need, all the like day-to-day stuff you have to do. It's just, I hate it so much. I'd rather do funny, creative, goofy videos and nonsense and like all that kind of stuff. That's more fun for me, but that's not sustainable. And that's not how you get like, realistically, people a lot of time think, well, if I just have one go viral, like one thing I would tell people who want to like get that viral video, click on the viral video, especially authors, click on their page, go look at how many followers they have. You will see people go viral with hundreds of thousands of followers, or hundreds of thousands of likes and views and everything else. They'll have 1,000 followers. That your audience and virality are not the same thing. And so being able to nail those two things down is really complicated. But once you get it, like once you start to nail it down, it starts to go much better. Like my Ethan Gray accounts don't have a ton of followers, but I don't want them. That's not their point, right? Like there aren't that many authors out there. Like I want people to want to buy my books, but I also need books for people to want to buy them. And that's kind of the truth of all this, is like figuring all that out. And it's really hard.
And just figuring out what you want to, just like that. Like, you know, if you don't know what you want, then you're just kind of putting stuff out there. Are you trying to bring in the readers? Are you trying to connect with the authors? And just narrowing down, what is it that's your end goal? What is it that you want? That'll help a lot.
Yeah. Really, I think it's kind of like whenever you write a book, a lot of people say write the ending first, right? Like, it's kind of like that. Like, you need to look at what you want. And for me, like, when I started off in this very early on, I was like, what do I want? Before I made a single book or audio or anything, I was like, what do I want? And I was like, I want to be a full-time voice actor. I want to get better at acting. I want to be a creative. I want to get to do this full-time. And then I looked at the market and I went, can I do that with audiobook narration? It looks like there's only like maybe a dozen guys who do that. And so maybe not, maybe I'd love to. I will always do books, and that is going to be something that will always live in my heart. I think some people look at narration as like a stepping stone. That is never the case for me. I've never thought about the book community or narration or smut or romance or any of that as a stepping stone to anything else. It's just that it is hard to live in that space and do nothing else because you will not make enough money. There are people that I think all of us know the name of that are famous narrators who have other jobs, because that is the reality of it, is that it is a lot of time. You're paid per hour instead of per minute, which is the opposite of how most voice acting gigs go. You're paid per line or per minute or in perpetuity for what you're doing. It is a really hard market to stay in just solely that, unless you have like a production company or you like are very, very good and in very high demand and you're paid really highly. And so it's tough. But at the same time, you know, my end goal was like, I want books to be a piece of this. And so it's always been a piece of it. I have a podcast about smut for a reason. Like, I like this community a lot. And so I want to be a part of it, even if I'm not working on a book because I get like 10 commercial gigs. I mean, that's not going to happen. But if for some reason that were to happen and I'm like booked back to back on animation or something like that, awesome. I still have a podcast where I'm going to talk about smut. So I'm still going to be in the community, learning about, hearing about what's going on. You know, I always know like the hottest goss about like, you know, all the crazy stuff that, you know, Ken and I'll like stop and be like, did you hear about NaNoWriMo and what they're doing? Or like, did you hear about this? And like, we'll like stop and have those conversations. And so that's always fun.
What do you read?
I went on. Right now, what I read is nothing. Like, I read just the books that I prep. I have a whole bunch of, I'm not sure you'll see. I have a whole bunch of books behind me that I'm going to read that I haven't yet, that are like things that people have bought for me that I think is fun. Like, I've got The Ritual sitting over there that I haven't read, and I was like, oh, I should read that. But right now I'm stuck in like book prep land. So all I do is read my own books. Before this, I was reading a lot of like fantasy. I did the last book I read for fun before getting into narration, where I was kind of like stuck just reading the books that I'm not stuck because I love them, but the books that I'm prepping, was In the Lives of Puppets by TJ Klune, I think was the author. The same person who did the Cerulean Sea book. And it is incredibly good and funny and weird, and I love it. I read the Kingkiller Chronicles twice, sadly. That is
Sadly.
because you won't do the last one anyway. It's fine.
Oh yeah,
it's never going to come out. It's all right. You know, I've read a lot of fantasy. That's been kind of my focus. I'm a big D&D guy, so a lot of like my interest is like, yeah, I like active. I get paid to run Dungeons and Dragons games.
Wait a second. Are you a DM too?
Yeah. I'm actually. I can't announce officially like any names or anything, but I'm in conversations to co-produce a. If I can get permission, let me ask. But if I can get permission, I'll let you guys announce this. But we are a bunch of audiobook narrators like D&D, and there's a conversation happening around doing a live stream / podcast where a bunch of audiobook narrators play D&D.
Yes,
And I would be
that's
the DM.
something that we have been talking about for a while now. Like Critical Role, just that is genius.
It'll
like
never happen
what they
again.
did.
There's no other Critical Role.
Well, yeah. I mean, there's plenty of people who are trying, and they make it up there, but not at the level of Critical Role. Like that is just the combination of those people are just beautiful.
Yeah.
But D&D is such a great way to showcase authors who have creativity on their storytelling, and then like narrators voicing other people, and then it's just so fucking therapeutic to play other people and put them through situations that are fucking hard. And I love D&D.
I do too. I've been a DM for probably 15 years at this point. I've been getting paid to be a DM through there's an app called Start Playing Games where you can like play D&D with people. And I've been getting paid to do that for about a year, I think, at this point. And I may be co-producing this podcast where I would be the DM and a bunch of audiobook narrators would be playing D&D with me. We'd all be doing goofy voices, trying our best to do the RP British no, not really, but doing all the different accents and voices and fun things. And there's also there's an event I'm supposed to go to next year where I don't know. I'm not going to name the event because I don't know if this is public, but there's a D&D element of it where we might do like a live play. And so that's the kind of stuff that I'm really excited about too. I think there's a lot of creativity in that space of creating nobody's going to sit through one more Critical Role because it's 4 hours long. No one else is going to do that. But like we're looking at doing like a 1 to 2 hour stream and then like a 1 hour podcast. And that way it can be a really condensed, like interesting product to listen to. And a bunch of audiobook narrators talking to microphones, pretending to be something they're not. Like people already pay us to do that. Surely people would be interested in that.
I wish. Okay, so you know how like in Dragon Ball Z, how there was Dragon Ball Z Kai?
Yeah. Like the truncated version.
I wish that there was. Yes, I wish there was a way because I'm going through Critical Role right now, and I'm like, I just want the Kai version of this, please.
Can you? If you don't know already, Amazon Prime has a TV show, a cartoon of it.
Yeah, Vox Machina is amazing.
Which is basically it's like a summarized version of it. So I'm sure they'll do one in the future.
I love Vox Machina, but the element of watching the actual people, human characters, go through that you can't get it in just the animated series. No. Like there is a magic to Critical Role and the actual sessions they do.
And that's the thing too that's going to be interesting for us as narrators and getting into this space is that like half of us don't show our face, right? Like because we make smut or romance or erotica or whatever we think jobs may not love that we do. And so, or whatever we might do around our life that we don't want to necessarily have our faces shown, but there's tons of valid reasons to do that. And so it's going to be really interesting from the perspective, like when you watch Critical Role, a big element of that is like watching the people because they're wonderful people. They're also clearly acting a lot of the time. Not that there's anything wrong with that. They're great actors and they're wonderful people. They clearly get along. They're having a good time. That element of it's going to be lost whenever a bunch of audiobook narrators are all over the world having a conversation on a microphone. But I do think it's still going to be really fun. And, I'm excited about it. I think it'll be more popular as a podcast, but what do I know? We'll see.
Yeah. Send me the deets. I want to be either as a listener or, involved somehow. That is something that I have been wanting to do personally is get some sort of D&D session going with narrators and authors because can you imagine an author too? Like they don't necessarily have to have the voice, but gosh dang, I bet their character is going to do some crazy shit.
Oh yeah. That's so for us, I'm sorry to keep harping on this. I also don't know if I can name it. I'll ask and let you guys know so you can share it. But we are, everything needs a gimmick, right? Like you need a selling point. So for people who aren't in the book community, they're not going to get it if it's a bunch of authors and narrators. But if we can say like, we're a bunch of audiobook narrators who are doing this, we're intentionally looking for a certain number of people so that every couple of episodes or maybe even every episode we can have a guest and that guest can be an author. So that's kind of the goal. So by the way, Randy, we'll talk later at some point.
Hit me up.
But that is kind of like what we're thinking is like, if we get an odd number of people, we can add an even guest and then we can have like, hey, pitch your book, come on the stream or the podcast, pitch your book. And then let's also play some D&D, kick some ass for 2 hours. Maybe you get to do like multiple, episodes where you come on and off or whatever. And like, that's something that we've talked about doing. That'll be fun.
Yeah. With picking up, I was in a couple of D&D's sessions and games, but since picking up the podcast and everything else, I was like, I had to step away from them and it's breaking my heart. So if I can just combine it all together, my little heart will be so happy.
Start looking at Friday nights, see if you can get some free in the coming months.
Scheduling out Friday, blocking them off.
At least watch our stream whenever we start doing that, and I'll tell you what it is whenever I can.
Oh, heck yeah.
We're still very, very early, but we have some very talented people who come from all over and have all these different talents. That's the cool thing about narrators too, is that almost everyone I've ever met is like has a good voice, is a really good actor, or has like a million other talents. And so it's a really diverse community. It's not like everybody just does one thing or is capable of doing one thing. The diversity of voices is something that's so amazing that I love to hear. I joked earlier about like a lot of time whenever I hear one narrator, I'm like, who is that? And it's always like somebody that you've heard before, but you're like, God, they're just so good in this one. They can do this other voice. That's what I want to be. And that's what I'm excited about seeing the community kind of grow into, of like all these diverse voices. I hope there's always this like middle market of people who are able to just like make a million exciting books, and Amazon isn't able to take that away from us. You know, I hope we always have this like wild west of like, we are this thing that people are really passionate about, excited about, will spend money on and come listen to. And I hope that keeps growing. I think the more people that find that, the better for all of us, really.
Well, and there's like, even if AI takes off and it goes, you know, and it does its thing and it takes over, like you said, all the books that are not produced in Audible format, there is the human element that people will pay for. Like just like, you know, me watching Vox Machina and enjoying the actual, you know, the series that they did, it's such a different feeling than watching these characters and this human element of like these. Matt Mercer just dropped the storyline, and you know, Marisha Ray's like she's pissed or something. Like there is the human element that's never gonna go away, and it's always gonna be something either people pay more for, or it's gonna be the element of like the fan base is the dedicated fan base.
Yeah, completely. And I think there are people who are gonna always make this a priority. There's someone who wrote in the video game space. There's a guy named Jason Schreier who just wrote a book about Blizzard and like their history and what everything kind of went wrong with them. And the guy voicing it is the guy who did the subway announcements in Persona 5. And like, I don't think that kind of stuff will ever go away. You know what I mean? That like niche, that's so insanely niche that I just said that and I watched Kathy's eyes go, what the fuck did you just say out loud? And I get it. Like, I understand. But there are people who will hear that and be like, I know who all that is. And they'll connect it and be like, I'm going to buy that book now. I think that will always exist in that space. I don't know how much more niche it can get.
Yeah, that's Travis Willingham for me. Like when you mentioned him earlier, I was like, okay, I have already told my husband if I ever, you know, have a celebrity that I can leave him for, that's who it's gonna be. And we don't even have to get rid of his wife because she's amazing too.
You're just becoming a what is it? Polycule is what they call it now. You're just going to become a polycule.
Yeah, Laura and Travis. Like, I love their relationship so much. I don't want to ruin that, but also, hi.
Yeah, I will always love how he did like Roy Mustang too. Like, he's always has a place in my heart of like, he's so good. Anyway, I'm going to stop bragging about other voice actors, but I I think that's kind of where I see a lot of the market going. Is like this more niche stuff. I hope it doesn't get too niche to where like nobody can really connect it except for like 1,000 people who buy it.
Yeah.
But, you know, we'll see.
But then, okay, but here's the other element of it. When people like me and you start getting excited about something that like someone else doesn't know about, but we've got this energy that's like, oh my gosh, are you serious? Other people will be like, wait, I want in on the secret. What's going on now? Please, someone tell me.
Yeah, I think that's the thing about micro communities that I think is really exciting, is that like there is a lot of that I can see. Again, kind of like, this is the reason I don't think voice acting will go away. The reason I don't think narration is going to go away is because there are people who, like Kathy said, are so passionate about, like, feral is a good word for it, about voices and about like those connections. And I think the more that they do, like Teddy Hamilton's a great example of this. He's done voice acting in video games and a bunch of other things. And like, there are people who love him, not just because he has a sexy voice, but they love him as an actor. They love him as a video game voice. They love him as all these different things that he's done. And that's the type of thing that I think we all are trying to create, is like, and especially me, like, I want people to hear my voice and go, oh shit, that's Ethan. Like, oh my God, I can't believe he's in this too. Like, I so desperately want to be able to, you know, start doing kind of all kinds of crazy things beyond just the podcast. And I had somebody the other day who like messaged me, who's been a friend of mine for a year, and is like, wait, are you this guy too? And I'm like, yeah, dude, we talked about this. Like, you've known this for a long time. And she's like, I didn't connect the dots. Like, honey, please. So like that's something that I get excited about too, is whenever people are like, you have a familiar voice, and I'm like, nowadays I'm like, I'm not entirely sure if it's because I did the go buy yourself a book audio, or if it's because of the audiobook, or if it's God only knows. And I'm trying to get to the point where like I don't want people to be able to recognize my voice. Like they'll hear it and be like, I know you from somewhere, but they won't know where. That's the goal, right? So like, is it a video game?
You're just
Is it
everywhere.
an audiobook? I want to be everywhere. So
that voice in their head, they're like, wait, I know I've heard that voice somewhere before.
I want to make it hard to where people are like, is he doing a country accent? Is that Ethan doing a country accent? Is he doing Irish? Like, I want to be able to I think that's fun and exciting, and yeah, I'm hoping someday it'll get to there.
I'm sure you will.
Oh yeah, no, and like we talked about before, also your personality has a lot to do with it, and
Right.
and people coming to you for a personality, and you've got a great personality. You're connectable, like it's something that people are drawn to.
Yeah.
So yeah, I can totally see that happening for you.
I'll also say the thing that I love about this, like, I think Maven talked about it as like a wave of narrators came onto like the scene all kind of at the same time, randomly, like a year or so ago, between like 2 or 3 years ago and now. There's been this big like movement of people getting into narration. They are just the best people. Like a lot of time when you think about audiobook narrators, especially in romance, you think about like a guy with like slick back hair who's kind of an asshole, who like he's sexy and you want to listen to him, but he's kind of a jerk and you don't like him. Like, you know what I mean? Like that's like the picture I think a lot of people get in their mind. I don't know anyone like that, but that's kind of like what I've pictured, right? Like it's some guy who like, oh, he wouldn't take a picture with these. Oh, get away from me. You're too.
That's the cover models, not the narrators.
But like
some of the cover models, and they are the sweetest people ever.
I believe that too.
But
that's the thing. Everybody in this this new batch of people, I'm trying to think who I was talking to. One femme narrator who's been in this market for a long time. She and I were talking about how like it can be a really tough place to be in. Like there's a lot of backstabbing and all kinds of things that can happen in this market for sure. But everyone I've ever met that's come into it recently, or that I've like Troy is spectacular. They're all wonderful people. Like I haven't run across anybody that I've been like, wow, I would never work. I would never work with that person. I've never had a conversation or spent time around anyone that I've been like, not them, like not once, which I think is crazy because, you get into acting spaces and people get egos and all kinds of things. I would have expected by now to run into one. Maybe I will eventually. Maybe in a year we like, let's do another one and let's see if I'm like this motherfucker. No, this one. But no, I mean everybody's been wonderful.
Also, just your personality, and I could be wrong. You could be a closet asshole, but just your personality, like I feel like even if someone was having a shit day, you'd be like, bro, what's wrong? Like, what? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
like,
I don't mean to be.
There's an aspect of who you are.
I can attest he's actually really fun. Actually,
You did. You met. We hung out in New Orleans.
We hung out. Yeah.
Got a little too drunk while we were out that one night, and had a hard time like being as much fun. I was just kind of like standing there watching. It was during Pride in New Orleans, so it was just like a lot of cool stuff happening here. I'm very sleepy now.
The bar crawl was.
Yeah. Oh boy. Why are we drinking absinthe at 2 p.m? Anyway, it was. I get the reputation because we do this thing on our podcast where we talk about like what type of cat you are, and Kenna jokes about how she's like the black cat, the angry, like standoffish, like more kind of witchy, like you don't mess with her. She'll kill you. She will. You will not survive a day if you cross that girl. Me, you can cross me and I'd be like, did you cross me? Really? When? We're not friends? I thought we were friends this whole time. Have you not liked me?
Orange tabby. I like the orange tabby. Like the super chill, snuggly kitty, but then all of a sudden, whap.
Yeah, I didn't. I'm sure people don't like me, but the like thought of people not liking me is one of those things that I don't process. Like,
you're like, that's their problem, not mine. Come here, friend.
Right. I'm also like I'm a triple Scorpio, so at the same time I'm just like people can have their own fucking business. I don't know. Go if you don't like me, that's fine. I don't care.
Oh yeah, that's something I tell my kids all the time. You're like, people's opinions of you are none of your business.
Yeah, it has nothing to do with me. You can hate me all you want. Great, awesome. There are people who make whole videos about how they don't like my audio. That's fine. I don't care. That's all right. I know I'm niche. It's fine.
No.
I love that. I feel like me and Kenna would get along. I love her person. I don't know her. I feel like I know her just because I listen to your guys' podcast, but she's great.
She is the absolute best. She is, to the people who are kind to her and love her and, you know, don't backstab her. She's the most wonderful person in the world. Everyone else,
watch out.
Watch the fuck out. And I honestly, God bless a like strong woman. Like, we need more of them in the world. Like, I hope my daughter's like as tough as nails. Like, you know, like all of us could benefit from having more strong women in our lives who challenge us every day. And Kenna is exactly that person. So I love that about her.
That's awesome. So aside from your podcast, which I feel like we've talked at length on this show, let's talk about your podcast. Oh no, I love it. I like talking about things I enjoy, and I enjoy your guys' podcast. So
thank you.
Where can people find you? I know we've talked a little bit about your social media and stuff, but what are the handles and how do they connect with you?
So I am morally Ethan Gray on everything. I don't have a lot of stuff. I know people have like Discord communities, all that. I don't have any of that stuff. I just have like Instagram, Threads, TikTok. I have a website that is Ethan. Hang on. I have to look it up.
Oh, I love this.
Ethan.
We totally know you don't
Voice.
Update that website enough.
It's fine. It's ethangrayvoice.com is my website. You can go there. There are a couple things you can do there too. I have like voice samples. I have a link to the podcast if you want to go there and find it. It's on every platform. If you type in Morally Gray, it'll pop up. I have a newsletter there, and I also, this is something that I've done for a little while, is if a small bookish business wants free voiceover, if they send me a script, they can do that on my website. I will do it for free. So if you're like an independent library or an independent small bookish business and you sell things and you want a free voiceover, I'll do it for free on my website. Just send me a script. And that's kind of where all my stuff is as far as all that goes. The podcast is literally on every platform I can push it to. So it's
and I love promoting it here too, because like I said, I like talking about stuff I enjoy, and your guys' dynamic is wonderful.
I've been listening to all of y'all's, and I've had a good time listening to it too. I love interview podcasts, but I just would suck at this, and I'm so glad that you're good at it. Because I would be so bad.
We have days where we get off the call and we're like, was that good? That was good, right?
Hey, quick recap. How was this one? Did we do a good job?
It was horrible. I'm thinking about actually not publishing it.
Jesus Christ, Ethan.
Son of a bitch. Hang on. I have to change sad. He's angry.
No, this was fantastic. I'm going to be honest, I was a little drained coming on here because we had a podcast right before this, and I was
no.
And then like just talking to you immediately in the beginning, like I started getting invigorated and my energy back and stuff like that. So that says a lot, because you're our second podcast of the day and you feel like this is a whole different day.
Hey, I'm an energy vampire. I'm just here to like soak up I'm making you feel like you're getting energy. I'm really just stealing all of it. It's mine now. Thank you.
Right. How do you do that? My kids do that all the time. I don't know how to do that.
Mine too. I gotta go give it to mine too, actually, now. Here they go, suck all my energy out. Come on, please.
Like an energy transfusion.
Oh, it's the worst.
I love the
yeah, we gotta go.
I personally love the talking to the narrators, because of course that's like my passion. And also, since I've started doing the production side of the audiobook production, it's even more like I understand some of the, things. Like, for example, I recorded because it's a fantasy book. And so I went and recorded. I was like, I'm just going to send this to my narrators so that they have it, like the pronunciation guide for all the names and even things that you would think would be normal. Really?
No, bless you. We need those. Yeah. So
I did it. It took me 3 fucking tries. Like I was like, okay. Like I said, it's going to rain some water. I'm like, well, no shit. It's going to rain water. Like it's not going to rain cats, for Christ's sake. And I was just laughing. And the third one, I'm like, okay, this is take 3. Now I know what y'all go through, because like
it's weirdly harder than you'd think. Like versus like directed script reads, which I've done a few of, where you have a producer there or a director there who's like, okay, do it like this, and you're like, I don't know if I can do that, but I'm gonna try. And those are fun because they're like, now be older, and you're like, okay, I guess I'm older now. Like this is how I sound when I'm older. Like what the fuck do you mean be older? I guess I'll have like a little bit more of that in my voice. Like they'll do stuff like that, and they'll like say like, okay, now be gruffer. You're angrier. All right, well, I guess I'm a meaner old man, and I I just don't like the way that you, like that kind of stuff, like where you're getting direction is faster and quick, and it feels a little bit easier versus like when you're in a booth by yourself alone, like, am I doing this right? That word sounds wrong. You really start to create this like echo in your own head of like, everything I make sucks. And a lot of the time I'll wipe a whole chapter, redo the whole thing. So I'm like, I hate all of this. And I know nobody else will, but I fucking do.
Yeah.
We are our own worst critics.
Yeah, it's the worst.
When
I'd much rather have a director.
Salinas was on here, he was like, he told the story of, I don't know if it's dropping on Monday. He,
yeah, I haven't heard it yet.
Yeah. He said that, he had to do, he had take pickups on the word Roman. And like, he was like, oh, the name Roman. Okay, he did it Roman. No, I think they want to Roman or something like that, some kind of weird thing, which you would never.
There's no like tilde or anything on it or something to like indicate. Oh boy, that's
it was pronunciation of a character's name.
And so there was like a lot of pickups.
That's a million pickups.
Yeah.
Oh boy.
And so I was thinking about that, and I'm like, okay, even like the word realm, you know, I did, like I said, every word that I could think that maybe would be possibly whatever. Any kind of.
I mean, you also have to think about like English isn't always necessarily people's first language. Like,
true.
And a lot of the time we're asked to do languages. Like, I just did a script read for an Irish thing, and there were like 2 Irish lines. I sat there listening to native Irish speakers say these 2 lines over and over again until I could manipulate it and make it sound like the character that I was doing saying those things, but like not just saying them, you know, to say the words, but saying them passionately and like. Oh, it is so hard to get that kind of stuff down right. It's helpful with the director for sure. And I got to tell you, if I could do the like directed sessions every time, those are great. I get out of my head so fast, and I'm just like, yeah, I'll be that. Sure. You want me to be Irish? Okay, I'll be Irish right now. You want me to do anything else? Oh, happily. Oh yeah. I'm like, just like, I love that's so much easier. Well, I can slow down, love. Do you want me to slow down and do my Irish a little bit quiet? No, I'm joking. But like it's nice whenever you get like that kind of like feedback, because you can get out of your own brain. Because a lot of acting and a lot of narration is just like turning your brain off and being like, I am this person. Don't worry about it anymore. Just be that person. And that's
a great way to compare AI to humans, because the logic side of our brain is what you have to turn off, and that's all AI is.
That's all it's doing. Yeah. It's feeling, it's not thinking, right? Like that's the thing that's hard about it is Troy one time said, like, think about it like confessing. Like the whole time you're just like, it is an emotional act reading an audiobook. It is like, this is happening and this is happening. And oh my God, she wore that dress. And it just like being able to like get in that moment and like, I am feeling this. I'm not just talking about it. And then also knowing like when to hit those moments so they have the most impact and all that kind of stuff. That's kind of the creative element of it. So yeah.
Yeah.
We keep going on tangents. I'm sorry.
I know.
Oh no, I love it. I was like,
it's a really good one.
When you said we're not going to follow script, I was like, oh no, I haven't looked at the script except for twice, and I was like, this is fucking great. I need all of them to be like this.
we don't script on Morally Grays at all. Like she will send me like, hey, we're going to talk about this today, like 15 minutes before we talk. Like she knows I don't have time to read too, so she'll like read the book and she's like, we're going to talk about this today. I'm like, okay.
Yeah. No, and that's great, but we have like a lot of, you know, young authors, people who they're not versed in telling their story, right? And so a lot of the times it's very much we lead the story because these people they're just not used to telling their story.
Right. And I also think one thing that people forget about the bookish space is that a lot of people in the bookish space are introverts. And so they're not used to having to talk about not just themselves, but like really a lot of things. You know, they're not used to having to communicate quite as much verbally as they have to kind of do this stuff. And that can be really hard. That's also a big piece of the marketing piece of like being an introvert in marketing is brutal because you're just constantly sapping yourself out of energy. And for me, I'm the opposite. I can't shut up. And so like when I have to get into a booth and slow down and actually do it.
Along so well, Ethan.
I can't help it. Like I just want to talk all the time.
Makes it so much easier, but also because not only you're so open and willing to talk about pretty much anything. Like there really wasn't anything that was off the table. Like and we didn't have to pull anything out of you, but it is like
Yeah.
Randy was saying with some of these other ones. And then also to guide the discussion so that it's not just kind of like an emotional word vomit, to where there's productivity to it and a positive, you know.
Yeah. I think that's something to being a storyteller too, right? Like being extroverted is, I think, a piece of that, but being a storyteller is knowing like what people might be interested in hearing and trying to focus on that, sharing perspectives like personally, and then also like, you know, what you think objectively the world is like. Like I talked about, you know, my own religious experience and also what I think religious history is like. That's the way I try to bring things together. You know, I also think I was a minister, so like having that experience around like the one thing I'll credit the ministry with is it teaches you how to be good at speaking. So,
Right? Yeah. That is a skill that you don't realize. And I think that's that's one piece why a lot of our people who come on, they're like, I can create these worlds, I can do all this creative stuff, but telling you about my process and my
so
story,
hard.
no, I don't know how to do that.
Yeah, and I really think for me, it's like whenever I talk to people about marketing their own stuff, I'm like, just do both. Like you and the world. Do hit those two things as fast as you can, and you will honestly connect with most people. Like, I'm passionate about this. Here's why. Here's why I think it's needed in the world outside of myself. And I think that's pretty easy. Some people really nail that, and they've got it down to like a science where they're like, people like harems. I wrote harems. People liked ACOTAR. I wrote an ACOTAR, you know, fanfic that has become like a series. Like some people can just hit those things really quickly of like, I liked this, I did this, people like this. But for a lot of people, it's a more complicated story, and I think it's worth trying to tell, right? Like whatever way you can, just trying to keep going and telling that story over and tell it over and over again. Like people are like, I don't want to say the same thing. Say the same thing all the time, constantly, because not the same people are seeing your, you know, stuff every time. 100%.
Yeah, that's actually a marketing strategy is you take your most viewed video and either repost it or repost it very similar to how you did it the first time.
Or just keep like doing that same kind of thing over and over again. Like you can, that's a way of gaming the algorithm, which I hate doing personally. This is how I shoot myself in the foot. I hate algorithms and I hate the way that they function. I know that if I made the same content with the same kind of background and the same kind of whatever, the algorithms pick that up and they run with it. I hate doing that. So my backgrounds and everything that I do are always different. And so I always hit really different audiences. But I'm also kind of okay with that because for me, it's like I'll go insane if I have to sit in the same room, do the same like close transition, and then like do the same audio or the same music every time. I'll go absolutely bonkers if I do that. I can't do it. So that's a me thing.
That is Ethan Gray, ladies and gentlemen. Wrapped up in one word. You never know what you're going to get.
That is true. That is the one true thing about thank you so much, guys. I really
Ethan,
appreciate it.
you were amazing. This was fantastic. And I want to have you back on the show. You know, I would love to have you back on the show multiple times and being a part of whatever it is that you're going with the D&D stuff and also just meeting your co-host. So I feel like we'll talk a lot in the future.
I think so.
Yeah, I hope so. Yeah, Kathy, I'm going to take your spot. No, I'm joking. I'm going to take Randy's spot, and I'm going to co-host with Kathy. Okay, that's what we're going to do. No, I'm joking.
Yep, go for it. I think the swap thing would be so fun.
I mean, we can talk to Kenna about it. I think it'd be. We can figure out something fun to do podcast wise. At the very least, you definitely have an invite whenever we start doing guests on the D&D podcast. We'll talk for sure. I have a short list of authors. You're now on it, so I think there's like 3 people on that.
I thought you said you're not on it. I was like, damn.
No.
No.
Now on it. See, I make my own awkward situations by just talking what is in my head before I actually think it through.
You just assume nobody likes you, so you're like, oh no, they don't want me now.
Yep.
That makes sense. So, that's not true. That's not true. No, I think I have like 3 authors in mind for like guests.
Yeah, that's Kathy's job.
I'm the one that thinks that.
It's all right. We all hate ourselves. It's fine.
All right, Ethan, thank you so much for being on the show, and thank you, listeners, for listening to this episode of L3. We can't wait to see you on the next episode.
Waving by. Can't see me.
They'll be able to see you.
Okay, good. I realize like this is an audio medium. Why am I waving?
No, well, oh yeah. In Spotify, it's audio.
Hey guys, thanks for joining us on this episode of Lemon's Listening Library. Remember, every story has a journey, and every journey deserves to be heard. Keep reading, keep writing, and keep listening.